I am Nia, 32 years old, and my husband Marcus just made the biggest mistake of his life. While I was picking up our 3-year-old son Leo from daycare, my phone buzzed with a message that would destroy any ordinary woman. Moving to Spain with Jackie. I have transferred our savings to my private account. Good luck paying rent. I stared at the screen, rain pelting the windshield, and felt a cold calm settle over me. I looked at our little son in the back seat and responded with 4 simple words. Thanks for the update. Marcus thought he was leaving behind a helpless administrative assistant. He had no idea that when he arrived in Barcelona, he would be walking straight into a trap laid by a forensic accountant who had been tracking his financial crimes for months. Before I continue this story of absolute destruction, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to smile while someone dug their own grave. The rain was coming down in sheets outside the exclusivity of the Buckhead Playful Learning Center. It was 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of gray Atlanta afternoon that makes traffic a nightmare. I sat in my modest sedan, watching the windshield wipers fight a losing battle against the storm. My phone illuminated the dark cabin again. A notification from our joint bank account. Balance $0. Unauthorized wire transfer of $250,000 initiated. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply took a screenshot. Marcus had been sloppy. He thought that emptying the account was a power move, a way to leave me destitute and begging. He did not realize that by crossing state lines with that money, he had just turned a domestic dispute into federal wire fraud. I turned around to look at Leo, who was happily clutching his toy dinosaur. "Mommy, are we going home?" he asked. "Yes, baby," I said, my voice steady. "We are going to handle business." I picked up my phone and dialed a number saved only as contact 4. When the line connected, I spoke clearly. "Protocol 4 is active." He took the bait. The drive to our house usually took 20 minutes, but with the storm, it took 40. When I pulled into the driveway of the colonial-style mansion Marcus insisted we rent to keep up appearances, I saw my clothes before I saw the house. My silk blouses, my winter coats, and Leo's toys were scattered across the wet front lawn, soaking in the mud. The front door was open, and standing there with her arms crossed was Brittany, my sister-in-law. Brittany is white, married to Marcus's older brother Darius, and she has always treated me like the help. She stood under the porch awning, dry and smug, watching me step out into the rain. "You are late," she called out, checking her watch. "We expected you gone an hour ago." I walked up the steps, ignoring the ruin of my wardrobe on the grass. My key would not turn in the lock. They had changed it. Brittany laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the thunder. "Marcus authorized us to take possession of the property," she said, holding up a piece of paper. "You are not on the lease, Nia. You are legally a trespasser. If you are not off this property in 5 minutes, I am calling the police." Before I could respond to Brittany, the front door swung open wider. My mother-in-law Louise stepped out, holding a glass of wine that used to be mine. She looked me up and down with that familiar sneer she reserved only for me. "Look at you," she said, shaking her head. "Soaking wet and pathetic. No wonder Marcus left. He needs a woman who knows how to shine like Jackie. She knows how to make a man feel like a king. You just make him feel tired." I looked at this woman whose medical bills I had secretly paid for the last 3 years because Marcus was too broke to help her. She was wearing a cashmere cardigan I had bought for her last Christmas. "Mom, please," I said, keeping my voice low. "Leo is in the car. Do not do this in front of him." Louise took a sip of wine. "You should have thought about your son before you became such a bore, Nia. Marcus deserves to be happy in Barcelona. He deserves luxury, not a wife who counts coupons. You brought this on yourself. Now take your trash off my son's lawn before Brittany makes that call." I turned to go back to the car to shield Leo from this scene, but Darius, Marcus's older brother, blocked my path. He was a large man who managed a restaurant downtown, though he spent most of his time borrowing money he never paid back. He held out his hand. "Keys," he demanded. "Excuse me," I asked, tightening my grip on my purse. "The Mercedes," he said, pointing to my car. Marcus said I could have it as collateral for the emotional distress of his marriage failing. Plus, he owes me money, and since he took the cash, I am taking the car. "That car is in my name, Darius," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "If you touch it, I will report it stolen." Darius laughed, stepping closer, using his size to intimidate me. "You really think anyone is going to listen to you? You are broke, homeless, and husbandless. Give me the keys. Nia or I will take them." He snatched my purse strap. I yanked it back, but not before he grabbed the spare key fob I kept on the side pocket. He clicked the unlock button and smirked. "Thanks, sis. You can take an Uber." A siren wailed in the distance, getting louder until a police cruiser pulled into the driveway. Brittany had called them before I even arrived. Two officers stepped out into the rain. One of them, Officer Miller, was a regular at the restaurant Darius managed. I saw the recognition in his eyes as Brittany rushed down the steps, putting on her best damsel in distress performance. "Officer, thank God you are here," she cried, pointing a manicured finger at me. "This woman is trespassing. We asked her to leave and she is becoming aggressive. She is scaring the children." Officer Miller approached me, his hand resting on his belt. "Ma'am, I am going to need you to step away from the homeowners and vacate the premises immediately." I looked at him calmly. "I live here," I said. "My child's things are inside." Brittany interjected loudly. "She is not on the lease. My brother-in-law is the tenant, and he gave us legal authority. She is just an ex-girlfriend refusing to let go." The officer stepped closer, looming over me. "Ma'am, if you are not on the lease, you need to leave. Do not make me cuff you in front of your kid." I leaned in close to Officer Miller and whispered 7 digits. It was the case number of an internal affairs investigation regarding missing evidence from his precinct, a file I had audited 3 months ago. His face went pale. He stepped back, clearing his throat. "Actually, it looks like a civil matter, folks. But ma'am, you should probably go to avoid further conflict." I walked back to the Mercedes, realizing Darius had already disabled it by pulling the spark plug wires, something he learned in his failed mechanic days. He waved the wires at me from the porch. I grabbed Leo from the car seat, shielding him with my jacket, and called an Uber. We sat in the back of a beat-up Honda Civic, shivering as we drove away from the house I had paid rent on for 5 years. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Jackie Marcus's mistress was live streaming. I clicked the link. She was sitting in a first-class pod sipping champagne. On her finger was a 3-carat diamond ring. I recognized the stone. It was the exact cut and clarity Marcus and I had looked at 5 years ago, the one he said we could not afford. Now he had bought it with my savings. "Hey guys," Jackie chirped to the camera, blowing a kiss. Finally leaving the negativity behind. Off to Spain with my baby. No more drama, no more dead weight, wifey holding him back. Comments flooded the screen from our mutual friends. "Finally, he is free," one wrote. "She was always a gold digger anyway," wrote another. I turned off the phone and hugged Leo tighter. The Uber driver looked in the rearview mirror, eyeing my wet clothes and the crying toddler. "You okay back there?" he asked. "I am fine," I said. "Just take us to the St. Regis." He raised an eyebrow. "The St. Regis Hotel? That is pretty fancy for—" He trailed off, looking at my muddy shoes. "Just drive, please." When we arrived at the luxury hotel in Buckhead, the doorman hesitated before opening the car door. I looked like a drowned rat. I walked to the front desk, holding Leo on my hip. The receptionist looked at me with thinly veiled disdain. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting I was in the wrong place. "I need a room," I said. "The presidential suite. For a month." She scoffed. "Ma'am, that suite is $5,000 a night. And we require a credit card for incidentals." I reached into the lining of my cheap purse and pulled out a card holder Marcus did not know existed. I slid a black Centurion card across the marble counter. The receptionist's eyes widened. Her entire demeanor shifted instantly. Of course, Ms. Brooks. Right away. The next morning, I walked into the glass tower of Sterling Financial Group. I was wearing the spare outfit I kept in my gym locker in the building basement, a generic gray suit that made me look like exactly what everyone thought I was, a mid-level administrative assistant. The office was buzzing. Whispers stopped as I walked by the cubicles. They had seen the live stream. They knew my husband had left me. I could feel their pity and their judgment. Poor Nia pushed around and broke. Becky from HR gave me a sad smile. "Mr. Sterling wants to see you in his office immediately," she whispered. "Bring your box." Everyone watched as I walked to the corner office. They thought I was getting fired. After all, drama follows the desperate, and corporate firms hate drama. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped inside. Mr. Sterling, the CEO, was standing by the window. He turned around, not with a termination letter, but with a thick file folder. Sterling locked the door and closed the blinds. He pointed to the leather chair opposite his desk. "Drop the act, Nia," he said. "We have a crisis." I sat down, my posture shifting from the meek assistant to the predator I actually was. I crossed my legs and looked him in the eye. "Is it the Zurich account?" I asked. Sterling nodded. "We have confirmation. The money laundering scheme is funneling through a shell real estate company in Atlanta. They are using a fall guy to move the assets." He slid the file across the desk. I opened it. The name of the shell company was M&J Holdings. The registered director was Marcus Brooks. My husband. Sterling looked at me. "You know what you have to do." I nodded. "I authorized the audit," I said. "And Sterling, I am taking lead on this." Sterling smiled. "I knew you would say that. That is why we made you a silent partner 3 years ago. Go get him." I left the office at lunch and went to the bank. Not the branch Marcus used, but the private wealth division on the top floor. The manager, Mr. Henderson, greeted me with coffee. "We need to review the mortgage on your parents' house," he said, looking grave. I frowned. "My parents' house is paid off." "Not anymore," he said. 3 weeks ago, a home equity line of credit was opened against the property, $200,000, withdrawn in cash. He showed me the documents. There at the bottom was my signature, or rather a very good forgery of it. Marcus had not just stolen our savings, he had mortgaged the home my elderly parents lived in, forging my name to do it. He had left them vulnerable to foreclosure. I stared at the signature, and the last remnant of mercy in my heart evaporated. Mr. Henderson looked worried. "Should we call the police?" "No," I said, standing up. "The police are for amateurs. I am going to destroy him myself." Meanwhile, over the Atlantic Ocean, Marcus and Jackie were landing in Barcelona. They checked into a sprawling villa in the hills, a place that cost €20,000 a week. Marcus handed his credit card to the rental agent with a flourish. He was feeling invincible. He had the money, the girl, and the freedom. But when the agent swiped the card, the machine beeped. Declined. Marcus laughed nervously. "Try it again," he said. "It must be the international travel flag." The agent tried again. Declined. "Pick up card from issuer." Marcus frowned. He pulled out another card. Declined. Then a third. Declined. Jackie looked at him, lowering her sunglasses. "Babe, what is going on?" she asked. "Nothing," Marcus snapped. "Just a glitch. I will call the bank." He stepped away to make the call, shouting at an automated system that kept telling him his accounts were frozen pending a federal audit. He did not know that the audit had been authorized by the woman he thought was crying in an Uber. Back in Atlanta, Brittany was busy celebrating my demise. She decided to host a tea party at my house, the house she had kicked me out of yesterday. She invited the entire PTA board from the exclusive private school where her twins attended. She wanted to show off her new home and cement her status as the queen bee. I found out about it because the school principal, Mrs. Vance, is a client of mine. I handle her personal investments. Mrs. Vance texted me. "Are you hosting a party today? I thought you were in distress." I texted back, "I am not hosting, but I will be attending." I drove my rental car to the house. The driveway was full of Range Rovers and Teslas. I walked in the front door without knocking. Brittany was in the living room holding court, telling the women how she had graciously taken over the property to save it from foreclosure because I was so irresponsible with money. I walked into the center of the living room, still wearing my power suit. The chatter died down. Brittany's eyes bulged. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I told you to stay away." Mrs. Vance stood up. "Nia, it is good to see you. Brittany was just telling us how she is helping you manage your assets." I smiled a cold, sharp smile. "Is that what she said?" "That is interesting. Because according to the county records I just pulled, this house is currently listed as a pre-foreclosure because the tenant Marcus has not paid rent in 6 months." Gasps rippled through the room. Brittany turned red. "That is a lie. This is my family's property, actually." I continued speaking to the room. "The owner of this property is an LLC managed by Sterling Financial, and they just issued a notice to vacate for illegal subletting." I turned to the neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, the biggest gossip in Buckhead. "Did you know that eviction notices are public record? You can look it up online right now. Phones came out immediately." Brittany watched in horror as the women she was trying to impress began whispering and scrolling. Mrs. Higgins gasped. "Oh my God, it is true! Notice to vacate issued today. Illegal occupants listed as Brittany and Darius Wilson." Brittany dropped her teacup. It shattered on the hardwood floor. "Get out!" she screamed at me. "Get out of my house, I am leaving," I said calmly. "But you might want to start packing. The sheriff usually gives 48 hours after the notice is served." I walked out, leaving Brittany standing in the shards of her own china, surrounded by the judgmental silence of the PTA. That evening, Darius arrived at the upscale steakhouse where he worked as the general manager. He was in a foul mood after Brittany called him screaming about the party. He planned to take a few bottles of vintage wine from the cellar to calm her down, something he had done for years without being caught. He unlocked the cellar door and froze. Sitting at the small tasting table was the restaurant owner, Mr. Moretti, and a team of auditors. They had ledgers spread out in front of them. Mr. Moretti looked up, his face dark. "Darius," he said, "we were just looking at the inventory logs. There is a discrepancy of $50,000 in wine over the last 2 years. Darius stammered. "That must be a mistake. I checked the logs personally," exactly, the lead auditor said. "And we found that the digital signatures on the inventory checks were altered. By you." The auditor turned around. "It was a junior associate from my firm. I had sent him the tip anonymously 3 days ago." Mr. Moretti stood up. "You are fired, Darius. And if you do not pay back every cent by the end of the week, I am pressing charges. Get out before I call the cops." While Darius was being escorted out of the restaurant by security, my mother-in-law Louise was at the front desk of the private hospital where she received her weekly vitamin drips and massages. She handed the receptionist her platinum insurance card. The receptionist swiped it and frowned. "Mrs. Wilson, this card comes up as invalid." Louise laughed. "That is impossible. My son pays for the premium package. Try it again." The receptionist tried again. "Still invalid, ma'am. It says the policy was canceled by the primary policyholder this morning." Louise pulled out her phone to call Marcus, but I had already blocked her number on his family plan, which ironically was also in my name. She called me instead. I answered on the first ring, putting her on speaker so my lawyer could hear. "Nia." "What did you do to my insurance?" Louise shrieked. I was sitting in the St. Regis drinking tea. "Hello, Louise. I canceled the policy. Since I am just a boring wife who holds Marcus back, I figured I should stop holding back his money too." "You are paying for this," she stammered. "I thought Marcus was." "Marcus has not paid a bill in 5 years, Louise. I pay for your condo, your car, and your treatments. And as of today, the gravy train has derailed. Good luck with your health." My phone rang an hour later. It was a FaceTime request from Marcus. He was sitting on the terrace of the Spanish villa, but he looked sweaty and pale. Behind him, Jackie was pacing, looking at her phone. "Nia, pick up," he shouted when I connected. Why is my credit card not working? And why is Brittany saying she is being evicted? I leaned the phone against a vase of white roses so he could see the luxury suite behind me. Hello, Marcus. Having trouble in paradise. Stop playing games, he yelled. Unfreeze the cards. I need to pay for dinner. I took a slow sip of tea. I cannot do that, Marcus. Those cards are part of a federal investigation now. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice trembling. You moved $250,000 across international borders, Marcus. That triggered a flag. And since you forged my signature on the mortgage documents, the bank has frozen all associated assets. You are broke, Marcus. And you are wanted for fraud. Nia, listen to me. Marcus pleaded, his arrogance cracking. You have to fix this. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I had permission. I will come back. We can work this out. I laughed. Work it out, Marcus. I am the one who reported you. I hired the private investigator who is currently photographing Jackie with that Russian guy she met at the club last night. Marcus turned around. Jackie. Jackie stopped pacing. She looked at the phone, then at Marcus. Is it true? Are you broke? Marcus looked at her. Baby, it is just a temporary hold. Jackie grabbed her Louis Vuitton bag. Temporary. You told me you were a millionaire. I am not staying here if you cannot even buy dinner. She stormed out of the frame. Marcus chased after her. Jackie. Wait. The phone fell over, staring up at the Spanish sky. I ended the call. The next morning, Brittany heard a knock at the door of the mansion. She opened it, expecting her friends to apologize for leaving early. Instead, a process server handed her a thick envelope. You have been served, he said. Brittany tore open the envelope. It was a lawsuit from the credit card company. $50,000 in debt on a card she thought Marcus was paying off. But the real kicker was the second document. A subpoena for her to testify in the fraud case against Marcus. Because she had signed as a witness on the forged mortgage documents, believing Marcus when he said it was just paperwork for a refinance. She was not just broke. She was an accessory to a felony. She collapsed on the porch, realizing that her blind loyalty to her brother had just cost her everything. In Barcelona, Marcus was desperate. He had no money, no car, and the villa owner was demanding payment. He decided to send an email to Jackie begging her to come back to bring the cash she had stashed. But before he could hit send, he received an email from an anonymous sender. Subject: the truth about your assets. He opened it. It was a detailed spreadsheet of every lie he had ever told. The properties he claimed to own, leased. The stocks non-existent. The cars leased in Nia's name. And at the bottom a note. Your wife is not a secretary. She is the auditor who flagged your shell company 3 years ago. She has been building this case while you were building your ego. Run. Marcus stared at the screen. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had not just betrayed his wife. He had tried to outsmart the person who wrote the book on catching thieves. Back in Atlanta, the dominoes continued to fall. With Brittany facing eviction and legal trouble, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She turned on Darius. She called the police and reported that the stolen wine from the restaurant was stored in Darius's trunk. She hoped that by turning him in, she could cut a deal. Darius was arrested in the parking lot of the motel where he was sleeping. He called Nia from jail, begging for bail money. Nia did not answer. Instead, she forwarded the voicemail to the district attorney as evidence of his flight risk. Louise was alone in her condo when the power went out. Nia had stopped paying the utility bills. She sat in the dark, clutching her phone, scrolling through contacts. No one answered. Her bridge club friends had seen the news about the fraud. Her family was in chaos. She realized for the first time that the boring, quiet daughter-in-law she had despised was the only thing standing between her and the abyss. And she had pushed her in. She wept in the darkness, the silence of the empty condo, amplifying her regret. In Spain, the net was closing. The hotel manager called the Guardia Civil after Marcus tried to sneak out without paying. They found him hiding in a supply closet near the pool. When they ran his passport, the Interpol red notice popped up. Wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering. He was handcuffed and dragged out of the hotel screaming that he was an American citizen and that this was all a misunderstanding. As they shoved him into the police car, he saw Jackie standing on the corner watching. She was wearing his Rolex. She waved, then turned and walked away with the Russian man. I flew to Barcelona 2 days later. Not to save him but to close the file. I walked into the detention center wearing a white suit that cost more than Marcus's car. The guard led me to the visitation room. Marcus was sitting there unshaven, wearing a gray jumpsuit. He looked up, hope flashing in his eyes. "Naya baby, you came. I knew you would not leave me here." I sat down and placed a document on the table. It was not bail papers, it was a divorce decree. "Sign it," I said. "And tell me where the rest of the cash is." Marcus cried. "I spent it, Nia. I spent it all on the villa and the ring. Please just get me a lawyer." I stood up. "You have a lawyer, Marcus. A public defender. And as for the ring," I said, pulling a small velvet bag from my pocket. "Jackie sold it to a pawn shop for cash to get to France. I bought it back this morning. It looks better on me anyway." I walked out of the prison putting the ring on my middle finger. The Spanish sun was shining. I had a flight to catch. Not home to Atlanta, but to the Maldives. My firm had given me a 6-week bonus leave for closing the biggest fraud case of the year. I took out my phone and blocked the last remaining number from my old life. Then I hailed a taxi and never looked back. I pulled my sedan into the driveway of the colonial estate on Tuxedo Road, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the torrential Georgia downpour. Through the gray sheets of rain I saw them. My vintage Chanel coats, Leo's hand-painted nursery books. My entire life was scattered across the manicured zoysia grass, drowning in the mud. I did not run. I stepped out of the car with a deliberate slowness, the cold water instantly soaking my blouse, and walked up the stone path. I reached the solid oak double doors and slid my key into the lock. It stopped halfway. It refused to turn. They had changed the cylinders. The door swung open, but I was not greeted by warmth or shelter. Brittany stood in the threshold, dry and immaculate, in a crisp white linen blouse that cost more than my car payment. She held a black heavy-duty trash bag in one hand and a glass of Chardonnay in the other. She looked at me with that specific brand of suburban condescension she had perfected over the years, the look of a woman who believes she owns the world because she married into the right zip code. "You are trespassing, Brittany," said her voice cutting through the sound of the thunder. She heaved the bag onto the wet porch steps. The plastic burst open, spilling my lingerie into a puddle of dirty rainwater. Marcus was very clear in his instructions before he boarded his flight. He wants the house cleared of all clutter before he returns from his sabbatical. Since you are not listed on the lease agreement, that clutter includes you. I looked at the ruined silk at my feet, then back at her face. "Brittany, it is pouring rain. My son is 3 years old, and he is sitting in the car watching his aunt throw his toys in the mud. Open the door. We are coming inside to get dry." Brittany laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "This is not a homeless shelter, Nia. Marcus signed power of attorney over to Darius and me this morning via digital notary. We are the legal occupants of this estate now. You have absolutely no rights here. In fact, you are currently violating private property laws." She took a sip of her wine, savoring the moment. I stood, my groundwater dripping from my nose, my eyes locked on hers. "You really want to play this game, Brittany? You want to explain to a judge why you locked a toddler out in a storm?" Brittany pulled her phone from her pocket, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I do not have to explain anything to anyone. You never belonged in this neighborhood anyway, Nia. We all knew it." Marcus just finally woke up and realized he deserved better than a woman who counts pennies. "We are just correcting a mistake." She tapped the screen of her phone. "You have exactly 3 minutes to remove that piece of junk car from my driveway." If you are still here at 5:05, I am calling the Buckhead precinct. I am sure they will be very interested in removing an aggressive intruder." Before Brittany could press the call button, the heavy oak door swung open wider. My mother-in-law, Louise, emerged from the shadows of the foyer. She moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who believes she is royalty, despite having zero assets to her name. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere cardigan that I had bought her for her 65th birthday, because she complained the heating in her condo was insufficient. In her hand she held a crystal goblet filled with the vintage Merlot Marcus had been saving for a special occasion. Apparently, my homelessness was that occasion. "Mom, please," I said, the rain plastering my hair to my face. "Tell Brittany to stop. Leo needs to use the bathroom. We just need to come in for 5 minutes." Louise took a slow sip of wine, her eyes scanning me with a mixture of pity and disgust. She did not look at the shivering child in the car. She only looked at me. "You know, Nia," she began, her voice smooth and cold like polished stone. "I tried to warn you. I told you on your wedding day that a man like Marcus needs stimulation. He needs a partner who shines." I wiped water from my eyes. "I have supported him for 5 years, Louise. I paid off his student loans. I paid for this house." Louise laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "You paid bills, Naya. That is what secretaries do. They pay bills and file paperwork. But do you know what they do not do? They do not inspire." She gestured vaguely towards the airport, towards Spain. "Jackie inspires him. I saw her Instagram story this morning. She was radiant. She knows how to dress, how to laugh, how to make my son feel like the king he is. You just make him feel tired." The audacity took my breath away. I wanted to scream that the king was a fraud living on credit I secured. I wanted to tell her that the expensive arthritis injections she got every month were not covered by Marcus's non-existent business, but by my premium insurance plan. But I stayed silent. I needed them to think I was weak. "You are boring," Nia Louise continued, stepping closer to the edge of the porch, but careful not to get her slippers wet. "You are a gray cloud in his sunny life. He called me from the plane, you know. He sounded happy for the first time in years. He said Jackie has a zest for life that you lost the moment you got that ring. So do not stand here and play the victim. You drove him away with your budgets and your schedules and your constant nagging about reality." She turned to Brittany, her face hardening. "Call the police if she is not gone in 2 minutes. I do not want her depressing energy ruining our celebration dinner." She turned her back on me and walked back inside, closing the door on the reality that I was the only thing standing between her and a state-run nursing home. I turned back toward the driveway, my shoes squelching in the mud, defeated for the moment. I reached for the handle of the silver Mercedes-Benz E-Class, the one luxury I allowed myself to keep visible, mostly because Darius refused to drive anything else when he borrowed it for his weekend hustles. But before my fingers could graze the metal, a heavy hand clamped down on my wrist. It was Darius. He loomed over me, smelling of stale cigar smoke and my husband's expensive cologne. He did not look at me with sympathy. He looked at the car keys clutched in my trembling hand like a predator eyeing a wounded rabbit. "Hand them over, Naya," he grunted, twisting my wrist just enough to send a sharp spike of pain up my arm. "What are you doing?" I gasped, trying to pull away. Darius let go. "That is my car. I paid for it. The title is in my name." Darius laughed, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in his chest. He did not let go. Instead, he squeezed harder until my fingers involuntarily spasmed and dropped the fob into his waiting palm. "You paid for it with Marcus's money," he sneered, stepping back and pocketing the keys. "Everything you have came from my brother, and now that you have driven him out of the country with your nagging and your coldness, this family is suffering. Do you know how much stress you have caused my mother? Her blood pressure is through the roof because of you." He walked around to the driver's side of the car, patting the hood affectionately. "Consider this collateral, Nia. Compensation for the emotional distress you have inflicted on the Wilson family. We need this vehicle to transport Mom to her appointments, since you clearly do not care about her health anymore. "You cannot just steal my car, Darius," I shouted, the rain mixing with the hot tears of frustration on my face. "That is Grand Theft Auto. Call it what you want," he said, opening the door and sliding into the leather seat that I had conditioned just last week. "But if you call the cops, I will tell them you gave it to me." Who are they going to believe? The hysterical woman screaming on the lawn, or the brother trying to take care of his sick mother? Besides, Marcus sent me a text authorizing the transfer of all vehicular assets to me before he took off. He slammed the door shut, locking me out of my own vehicle. Through the tinted glass, I saw him adjusting the mirrors, making himself comfortable in the driver's seat. He started the engine, the purr of the motor mocking me in the storm. He was not leaving. He was just establishing dominance. He was taking the only way I had to get Leo to safety. I stood there shivering and stripped of everything. My house, my husband, my car, and now my dignity. Darius revved the engine once, a final insult, before turning up the stereo so loud the bass rattled the windows of the house I was paying for. He was not just a thief. He was a parasite who had finally decided to kill the host. Blue lights flashed against the wet pavement, illuminating the torrential rain like a strobe light in a horror movie. Officer Miller stepped out of his patrol car, adjusting his belt with the swagger of a man who owned the neighborhood. I recognized him immediately. He was the same officer who sat at the VIP table at Darius's restaurant every Friday night, eating complimentary ribeye steaks and drinking top-shelf bourbon on the house. Brittany ran down the porch steps, ignoring the mud splashing onto her expensive linen trousers. She pointed a manicured finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of terrified victimhood. "Officer Miller, thank God you are here!" she screamed over the thunder. "She is violent." She tried to force her way inside. "She threatened my husband. Please, you have to arrest her before she hurts someone." Miller marched toward me, his hand resting on his taser. He did not look at Darius, who was still sitting comfortably in my stolen Mercedes, revving the engine with a smirk. He did not look at the clothes scattered across the lawn. He locked eyes with me, and I saw the decision had already been made. To him, I was just the angry ex-wife causing a scene in a respectable neighborhood. "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back," Miller barked, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for criminal trespass and disorderly conduct." I did not move. I stood my ground, shielding Leo's view of the cuffs with my body. "Officer, I live here," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to be heard over the rain. "My name is on the utility bills. My husband illegally evicted me an hour ago. This is a civil matter." "I do not care whose name is on the electric bill," Miller snapped, grabbing my arm and spinning me around. "The homeowners want you gone. You are disturbing the peace. Stop resisting, or I will add assaulting an officer to the charge." The cold metal of the handcuffs touched my wrist. Brittany cheered from the porch. "Finally. Lock her up." I knew I had exactly 3 seconds before he clicked the mechanism shut. I stopped pulling away. Instead, I leaned back against him, bringing my mouth close to his ear, and lowered my voice to a whisper that only he could hear. "Case number 79, Bravo 22, I whispered. Miller froze. His grip on my arm slackened instantly. I continued, my voice ice cold. "The audit of the evidence locker from last November. 15 kilos of confiscated narcotics that went missing during your shift. I know you doctored the logbook, Miller. I saw the digital footprint you left when you tried to delete the entry. If these cuffs click shut, the district attorney gets the full forensic report by morning." Officer Miller stumbled back as if I had burned him. His face went from flushed to ghostly pale in the span of a heartbeat. He looked at me, really looked at me, and saw for the first time that I was not just a housewife. He saw the predator behind the eyes. He quickly holstered the handcuffs, his hands shaking slightly. Brittany's smile faltered. "What are you doing? Why are you stopping?" "Arrest her." Miller cleared his throat, avoiding Brittany's gaze. He turned his body camera away from me. "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, upon further review, this appears to be a domestic dispute. I cannot arrest her without a warrant." Brittany shrieked. Are you kidding me? She is trespassing. Miller turned back to me, his eyes pleading for silence. Ma'am, you cannot stay here. The owners have requested you leave the premises. For your own safety and to de-escalate the situation, you need to vacate immediately. If you leave now, no charges will be filed. I rubbed my wrist where he had grabbed me. I nodded once. I am leaving, I said. But not because you told me to. I walked past him toward the street where a beat-up Honda Civic Uber was idling. I did not look back at Brittany, who was screaming at Miller on the porch. I did not look at Darius in my car. I picked up Leo, who was shivering in his car seat, and climbed into the back of the stranger's car. As we pulled away, I watched Officer Miller get back into his cruiser, likely to call his union representative. He had won the battle for Brittany, but he knew the war had just begun. The inside of the Uber smelled like stale menthol cigarettes and wet upholstery. It was a beat-up Honda Civic with a check engine light glowing ominously on the dashboard. The driver, a man named Kevin who refused to make eye contact, blasted talk radio to drown out the sound of the rain hammering the roof. I sat in the back seat, clutching Leo against my chest to keep him warm. He had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the trauma of seeing his family throw him out on the street. My phone vibrated in my hand, cutting through the numbness. A notification from Instagram lit up the dark car. Jackie the Gem is live. I should have ignored it. I should have thrown the phone out the window, but morbid curiosity is a powerful drug. I tapped the notification. The screen filled with the soft golden lighting of a Delta One first-class suite. Jackie looked flawless. Her hair was laid to perfection, her makeup immaculate, and she was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than the car I was riding in. She held a flute of Dom Perignon in her right hand, but she made sure her left hand was front and center. There it was, a 3-carat radiant cut diamond on a platinum band. I stopped breathing. I knew that ring. I knew the clarity, the color grade, and the exact price tag because I had saved the link on Marcus's laptop 3 years ago as a dream purchase. It cost $42,000. That was the exact amount I had transferred into our joint savings account last month for a down payment on a commercial property Marcus claimed he wanted to buy. Cheers to new beginnings, y'all. Jackie cooed into the camera, admiring her own reflection. We are finally free from the negativity. You know how it is when you try to build an empire but your partner is just a leech dragging you down. Marcus has been suffering in silence for too long. He deserves a woman who matches his fly, not someone who counts coupons and complains about the electric bill. Marcus leaned into the frame looking relaxed and expensive in a Gucci hoodie I bought him for his birthday. He kissed Jackie on the cheek. To freedom, baby, he said, clinking his glass against hers. No more dead weight. No more nagging. We are living the life we deserve. I watched the comments section scroll by in a blur of emojis and cruelty. I recognized the usernames. These were people who had eaten at my table, people I had helped with their resumes, people I had driven to the airport. Tiffany B. wrote, "Finally, bro, Nia was always acting bougie with no budget. She thought she was better than us." Big Mike ATL commented, "Upgrade of the century. That ring is blinding. Marcus finally got a real one." Sarah J. added, "Gold digger got dug. Bye Naya, have fun in the gutter." They called me a gold digger. Me. The woman who worked 60-hour weeks investigating corporate fraud so Marcus could play real estate mogul. They laughed at my downfall, celebrating the theft of my life savings as if it were a romantic triumph. I did not type a response. I did not report the video for harassment. I simply took a screenshot of the ring. I zoomed in to ensure the metadata would capture the timestamp and the GPS location of the flight. This was not just a flex. This was evidence. Proof of assets purchased with stolen funds crossing international lines. Proof of lifestyle expenditures inconsistent with reported income. I locked the phone screen, the image of the diamond burning into my mind. I looked out the window at the passing city lights of Buckhead. The tears I expected did not come. Instead, a cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. They thought I was destitute. They thought I was broken. They had no idea they had just handed me the first nail for their coffins. Kevin the driver looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes tired. Where to? Lady. You put in a drop-off near the mall, but everything is closed. I adjusted Leo in my arms, feeling the weight of his sleeping body. I looked at the driver with dry eyes. Change of plans. I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. Take us to the St. Regis. I have a reservation to make. The Honda Civic sputtered to a halt beneath the massive porte-cochere of the St. Regis Atlanta. The engine rattled one last time before dying, a stark contrast to the line of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces idling nearby. The doorman, a man named Arthur, who had opened doors for me when I attended gala events in my other life, hesitated. He looked at the mud splattered on the side of the Uber, then at my soaked clothes. He did not recognize me. To him, I was just a woman who had taken a wrong turn. I tipped Kevin the driver $50 cash, depleting the last of the physical money in my wallet. He drove off, leaving me standing on the red carpet with a shivering toddler and 2 wet trash bags of clothes that Brittany had not managed to ruin. I hoisted Leo onto my hip. He buried his face in my neck, smelling of rain and exhaustion. I walked past the doorman. He stepped forward as if to stop me, then thought better of it. The desperation in my eyes must have looked dangerous. The lobby was a cathedral of silence and money. Crystal chandeliers refracted light onto polished marble floors. The air smelled of white tea and old money. My sneakers squeaked loudly with every step, leaving faint muddy prints on the pristine floor. Guests in evening gowns and bespoke suits turned to stare. I heard a whisper. Is she homeless? I kept my head high. I fixed my gaze on the reception desk. The concierge was a woman with severe cheekbones and hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her name tag read Victoria. She watched my approach with the expression one might reserve for a cockroach scuttling across a wedding cake. She did not greet me. She simply waited, her fingers hovering over a security button beneath the counter. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with ice. The implication was clear. "You are lost. Please leave." "I need a room," I said, shifting Leo's weight. Victoria offered a tight, pitying smile. "I am afraid we are fully committed this evening, ma'am. There is a Motel 6 about 3 miles south on the highway. I can call you a cab if your ride has already left." She was lying. I knew the occupancy rates of this hotel because my firm audited their parent company last quarter. They were at 60% capacity. "I am not looking for a motel, Victoria," I said softly. "I am looking for a sanctuary." I set my cheap waterlogged purse on the marble counter. It made a squelching sound. Victoria wrinkled her nose. I reached past the maxed-out joint debit card Marcus knew about. I reached past the few crumpled bills. I slid my finger into a hidden slit in the lining of the bag, a pocket I had sewn myself 5 years ago. My fingers brushed against cold, heavy metal. I pulled it out. The American Express Centurion card. The black card. It was made of anodized titanium and weighed as much as a small stone. I placed it gently on the counter. The sound it made against the marble was distinct. A heavy, authoritative clack that echoed in the quiet lobby. Victoria looked down. The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She stared at the card, then up at me, her eyes wide with terror. She recognized the invitation-only status. She realized she had just tried to evict a woman who could buy the building. "I apologize, Ms. Brooks," she stammered, her hands trembling as she reached for the card. "I did not realize. The system did not show." I cut her off. "The Presidential Suite, Victoria. For 30 nights. And I need a private shopper sent up within the hour. My son and I have had a difficult day, and we require dry clothes." "Of course, Ms. Brooks. Immediately." She typed furiously, her attitude transforming from gatekeeper to servant in the blink of an eye. She handed me a gold key card with both hands like it was a sacred offering. I took the key. I did not smile. I did not thank her. I walked toward the elevators, the wet trash bag swinging from my hand. As the heavy brass doors closed, shutting out the stares of the lobby, I finally let out a breath. I was safe. And now I had a war room. The next morning, I walked into the glass atrium of Sterling Financial Group at 8:45 a.m. sharp. I was not wearing the silk and cashmere the private shopper had delivered to the St. Regis the night before. Instead, I wore a scuffed pair of loafers and a pale gray skirt suit I kept in my gym locker in the basement for exactly this purpose. To the world, I was still Nia, the invisible administrative assistant, the woman whose husband had just publicly humiliated her for the entertainment of the internet. The silence that fell over the bullpen when I swiped my badge was heavy and suffocating. Usually the morning hum of the trading floor was a wall of noise, shouting phones, ringing the clatter of keyboards. Today, it was a tomb. I walked to my cubicle near the copy room, keeping my eyes on the carpet. I could feel their stares burning into my back. They had all seen it. Jackie's live stream had circulated through the office group chats like a virus. "Did you see the ring?" I heard a whisper from the marketing row. It was huge. "Poor Nia. She is homeless," another voice murmured, too loud to be an accident. "My cousin knows her sister-in-law. They kicked her out in the rain." I sat at my desk and turned on my computer. My inbox was full of pity emails from people who had never spoken to me before. Subject lines like, "Thinking of you" and "So sorry for your loss" cluttered the screen. I deleted them all without opening them. I did not want their pity. I wanted their silence. Becky from Human Resources approached my desk. She was clutching a clipboard against her chest like a shield, her face twisted into a mask of professional sympathy. She did not make eye contact. "Nia," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Mr. Sterling needs to see you in his office immediately." The typing around us stopped. Heads peeked over cubicle walls. This was it, the final nail in the coffin of my public dignity. In corporate America, when the CEO calls a low-level assistant into his office first thing in the morning after a public scandal, it means one thing. You are a liability. You are drama. And you are fired. Becky leaned closer. "He said to bring your box, Nia. You know, just in case." I nodded slowly. I reached under my desk and pulled out the small cardboard box I kept ready. It contained a few personal items, a stress ball, a framed photo of Leo, and a cactus. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my cheap skirt. I began the long walk down the main corridor toward the corner office with the mahogany double doors. Every step was a performance. I hunched my shoulders slightly. I kept my head down. I let them see a broken woman walking to her execution. I heard the murmurs trailing behind me like smoke. "She is done. They are cutting her loose. Who can blame them? Nobody wants that kind of mess in a client meeting." I reached the executive suite. The executive assistant, a woman who had once made me wait 3 days to get a signature on an expense report, buzzed me in without a word. She did not offer me water. She did not smile. She just pressed the button under her desk that unlocked the heavy doors. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The lock clicked with a heavy final sound. The blinds were drawn, plunging the room into semi-darkness. Mr. Sterling stood by the window, his back to me, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. He was a formidable man, known for ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for failure. He turned around slowly. In his hand, he held a thick manila folder stamped with red ink. He looked at me, at the box in my hands, and at the gray suit that made me look like a ghost. "You can drop the act now, Nia," he said, his voice low and serious. "We have a situation." I set the box on the floor and straightened my spine. The hunch vanished. The fear evaporated from my eyes. I walked across the plush carpet and took the leather chair opposite his desk, crossing my legs with the confidence of a woman who owned the building. "Is it the shell company?" I asked, my voice sharp and clear. Sterling nodded, tossing the file onto the desk between us. "It is. Marcus just tried to move the funds into a flagged account in Zurich. He triggered the trap." Sterling sat down heavily in his leather chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the room. "You played the long game, Nia. I have to give you credit. Most women would have left him when he bought that first fake Rolex 5 years ago. You waited until he committed a felony. I opened the file Sterling had tossed onto the desk. My eyes scanned the ledgers with the cold, practiced precision of a veteran forensic accountant. I needed him to feel comfortable, Arthur. I said, my voice void of any marital sentiment. Criminals get sloppy when they feel safe. Marcus felt like a king because I let him. That is why he signed his name on the incorporation documents for M&J Holdings without reading the fine print. He thought he was building a real estate empire. He was actually building his own prison cell. I pointed to a highlighted section on the third page. Here it is. The wire transfer. $250,000. He routed it through the shell company in the Cayman Islands before sending it to the Zurich account. He thinks he is hiding assets from a divorce court. He does not realize he just deposited federal evidence into a flagged account monitored by the FBI for money laundering. Sterling nodded, tapping his finger on the desk. The Bureau called this morning. They tracked the transfer. They are ready to freeze the assets, but they need the lead auditor to sign off on the probable cause affidavit. They asked for you specifically. They know you have been tracking this network for 18 months. I reached into my cheap purse and pulled out a gold Mont Blanc fountain pen, a gift from the director of the FBI after our last joint operation. I signed the document with a sharp, decisive flourish. Done. Freeze it all. I want him to try to buy a stick of gum in Barcelona and get declined. I want him to feel the walls closing in before he even finishes his first sangria. Sterling leaned back, studying me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You know this blows your cover, right? Once we file this, your name is on the public record as the investigating partner. The administrative assistant persona is dead. The whole firm will know you own a 20% stake in this company. I stood up, smoothing the skirt of the polyester suit that made my skin itch. That persona died yesterday in the rain, Arthur. I am done hiding my intelligence to protect a man's fragile ego. I am done playing small so Marcus could feel big. I picked up the file and tucked it under my arm. By the way, I am taking the rest of the day. I have an appointment at the bank. I have a suspicion that Marcus's financial idiocy did not stop at wire fraud. If he felt bold enough to steal our cash, he likely touched the equity in my parents' home. Sterling smiled, a rare expression for the stoic CEO. Go get him, Nia. And take the company car. The driver is waiting downstairs. You look ridiculous in that Honda. I walked out of the executive suite not as the downtrodden wife, but as the senior forensic analyst and silent partner of Sterling Financial. The employees in the bullpen watched me pass, whispering about severance packages and sad endings. They saw a woman walking out with a box of personal effects. They did not see the shark swimming out to smell the blood in the water. I took the elevator down to the private garage where the black Lincoln Town car was waiting. To the First National Bank on Peachtree, I told the driver, and step on it. I have a forgery to confirm. The black Lincoln Town car idled at the curb of First National Bank on Peachtree Street. I stepped out, the humid Atlanta air hitting my face, but I felt nothing but cold rage. I bypassed the teller line and walked straight to the glass-walled office at the back. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager, was already standing. He looked pale. He had managed my personal accounts for a decade long before Marcus entered the picture, and he knew exactly who I really was. Nia. Thank you for coming so quickly, Henderson said, closing the door and blinds. We have a situation with the collateral on the Brooks account. I flagged it immediately when the wire transfer to Zurich hit the system, but the lien had already been processed 3 weeks ago. I sat down, placing my hands flat on the mahogany desk. What lien, Mr. Henderson? My parents' home in Savannah is paid off. I wrote the check myself 5 years ago. Henderson slid a document across the desk. His hands were shaking slightly. It is a home equity line of credit, Nia. $200,000. Withdrawn in cash over the counter at 3 different branches. The collateral listed is the deed to 424 Magnolia Lane. Your parents' house. I stared at the paper. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. There at the bottom of the loan application was my signature, or rather a signature that looked remarkably like mine to the untrained eye. But I saw the flaw immediately. The loop on the N was too wide. The slant was slightly off. It was a forgery. A good one practiced, but a forgery nonetheless. Marcus had not just robbed me. He had robbed my elderly parents. He had taken the equity from the home where my father grew roses and my mother hosted Sunday dinners. He had gambled their security on his Spanish fantasy. If he defaulted on this loan, the bank would foreclose. My parents would be homeless. I looked up at Henderson. Who authorized this? It was a remote notary, Henderson explained, wiping sweat from his forehead. A digital verification. We are investigating the notary now, but the funds are gone, Nia. They were bundled into the Zurich transfer. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the busy street. Marcus thought he was playing a game. He thought money was just numbers on a screen. He did not understand that for people like my parents, a house was not an asset. It was a legacy. It was blood and sweat and 40 years of factory work. He crossed the line, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Stealing my savings is a divorce matter. Stealing my parents' home is a declaration of war. I turned back to Henderson. Do not foreclose. I will cover the lien from my personal trust. But I want the original application, the IP address of the digital notary, and the security footage of every branch where he made a cash withdrawal. I want a paper trail so thick it will bury him. Henderson nodded vigorously. Consider it done. And Naya, we can file a police report for identity theft immediately. No police yet, I said, picking up my purse. If we arrest him now, the money disappears into legal fees. I need him to feel safe for exactly 24 more hours. I need him to spend a little more to dig the hole a little deeper. I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining, but all I could see was red. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the forensic team at my firm. Upload the flag to the international banking system, I ordered. Mark his passport as a flight risk associated with financial felony, and trigger the credit freeze. Now. I hung up and looked at the sky. Enjoy your first night in Barcelona, Marcus. Because tomorrow you are going to learn that you did not just marry a wife, you married the consequences of your own actions. The Villa Rosa sat perched on the cliffs of Barcelona like a white marble fortress overlooking the deep blue expanse of the Mediterranean Sea. Marcus stood on the terrace, a glass of vintage cava in his hand, surveying the horizon. He felt invincible. He had escaped the suffocating mediocrity of his life in Atlanta. No more Nia nagging him about receipts. No more pretending to work at a desk job he despised. He was free, rich, and living the life of an international playboy. Jackie sashayed onto the balcony wearing a silk sarong and oversized sunglasses. She looked like a magazine cover, exactly the kind of accessory Marcus felt he deserved. She pouted, tapping a manicured nail against her lip. Babe, this view is cute and all, but I have nothing to wear for dinner tonight. We are going to Lazarte, right? I cannot wear last season's Gucci to a 3-star Michelin restaurant. I need something fresh. I need Hermes. Marcus smiled, the gesture tight but arrogant. He patted the breast pocket of his linen jacket where his wallet sat, heavy and reassuring. Say no more, baby. Let us go to Passeig de Gracia. Pick out whatever you want. Daddy has got you. An hour later, they stood in the hushed, reverent silence of the Hermes boutique. The air smelled of expensive leather and old money. Jackie zeroed in on a Birkin 30 in Togo leather, a vibrant orange that screamed new money. She stroked the handle possessively. This one, she said. It speaks to me. The sales associate, a man with impeccable posture and a suit that cost more than Marcus's first car, nodded politely. An exquisite choice, monsieur. That will be 12,000 euros. Marcus did not flinch. He whipped out his platinum credit card and tossed it onto the glass counter with a flourish. Wrap it up, he commanded, not even glancing at the price tag. He was enjoying the performance. He was the big man on campus. The provider. The associate inserted the card into the chip reader. The machine hummed for a second, then emitted a sharp, dissonant beep. Transaction declined. The associate frowned slightly, a microscopic crack in his professional mask. I apologize, monsieur. The card has been declined. Marcus laughed a loud barking sound that made other shoppers turn their heads. That is impossible. It is a travel flag. American banks are so paranoid. Run it again. The associate tried again. Another beep. Declined. Do not honor. Jackie's smile faltered. She leaned in her voice a harsh whisper. Marcus. What is going on? Why is it declining? It is a glitch. Marcus snapped, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Here, try this one. He pulled out a second card. Declined. A third. Declined. The associate handed the plastic rectangles back with the tips of his fingers, as if they were infectious. Perhaps you should call your bank, monsieur, he suggested icily. We can hold the bag for 10 minutes. Marcus grabbed the cards and stormed out of the boutique onto the sun-drenched sidewalk. His hands were shaking with rage. He dialed the international priority number for his bank, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. When the automated system finally connected him to a human, Marcus exploded. Listen to me, you incompetent drone. I am in Spain. I am trying to make a purchase, and your garbage system is embarrassing me. I did not authorize any blocks. Unfreeze my cards immediately. Do you know who I am? There was a pause on the line, followed by the cool, detached voice of a senior fraud specialist. Mr. Brooks, we are aware of who you are. The hold on your accounts is not a travel flag. Your assets have been frozen pending a federal investigation into wire fraud and identity theft. We received the order this morning. What? Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. That is my money, I transferred it. Who authorized this? The authorization came from the account co-owner and the auditing firm, sir. The specialist replied. We cannot discuss this further. You will need to contact the authorities. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, his face draining of color. Co-owner. Nia. But that was impossible. Nia was a secretary. She did not know how to freeze assets. It had to be a mistake. A glitch. He took a deep breath, pasted a fake smile on his face, and walked back into the store. Baby, he said to Jackie, grabbing her arm a little too hard. The bank's global system is down. Solar flares or something. We have to pay cash later. Let us go. Jackie looked at the bag, then at Marcus. Her eyes narrowed. Solar flares, she repeated. She pulled her arm away. You better fix it, Marcus. I did not fly across the ocean to window shop. She walked out ahead of him, and for the first time Marcus noticed that without the wallet, his kingly reflection in the store window looked small and terrified. The next morning the sun broke over Buckhead, drying the mud from my public humiliation, but the stain on my family's honor was about to get much worse. Brittany, my sister-in-law, wasted no time in marking her territory. She sent out a digital invitation at 7 a.m. New Beginnings Tea Party, it read, hosted at the Wilson Estate. She was not just squatting in my home, she was parading it around like a trophy. She invited the entire PTA board of the exclusive prep school where her twins and my son Leo attended. These were women who judged you by your zip code and the season of your handbag. By noon, the driveway I had paid to pave was filled with white Range Rovers and Teslas. I watched from across the street in my tinted Lincoln town car, observing the spectacle. Caterers were carrying trays of champagne and mini quiches into the house. Brittany stood at the door wearing a pastel floral dress that clashed horribly with the colonial architecture greeting guests, with the wide manic smile of a woman desperate for validation. Welcome. So glad you could make it on such short notice. I heard her chirp as Mrs. Vance, the school principal, walked up the steps. We are just so relieved to finally have the house to ourselves. You know, with Marcus gone, we really needed to step in and manage the assets properly. Poor Nia just couldn't keep up with the maintenance. Mrs. Vance, a woman of few words and sharp intellect, adjusted her glasses. Is that so? I was under the impression Nia handled all the finances. She has always been very diligent with the tuition payments. Brittany laughed, a dismissive wave of her hand. Oh, bless her heart. Nia tried, but she is just an assistant, you know. She doesn't understand high-level estate management. Marcus basically let her play house. But now that the adults are in charge, we are going to make some big changes. I am already looking at contractors to redo the kitchen. That outdated marble has to go. I signaled my driver. It was time. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. I was not wearing the gray suit of the invisible wife anymore. I was wearing a structured Alexander McQueen blazer and pants sharp enough to cut glass. I stepped out of the car and walked across the street, my heels clicking a rhythm of impending doom on the asphalt. I did not knock. I walked straight through the open front door, right into the foyer where Brittany was holding court. The chatter in the living room died instantly. 20 women turned to look at me. Some looked pitying, expecting a breakdown. Others looked hungry for drama. Brittany froze her champagne flute halfway to her mouth. "Nia," she hissed, her smile dropping like a stone. "What are you doing here? I thought I made it clear you aren't welcome." I smiled, removing my sunglasses slowly. "Hello, Brittany. Hello, ladies. I apologize for the interruption. I just came to pick up a few things I left behind, and to deliver a housewarming gift." "We threw your trash on the lawn yesterday," Brittany snapped, stepping forward to block my path to the living room. "If you are looking for handouts, try the Salvation Army. This is a private event for the school board." "Actually," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the silent room, "I am here as a member of the board. Mrs. Vance invited me." Brittany spun around to look at the principal. Mrs. Vance took a sip of her tea and nodded. "She is right, Brittany. Nia is the chair of the Financial Oversight Committee. We were just discussing the upcoming audit." Brittany's face turned a shade of puce. "Financial oversight, she is a secretary." "Independent auditor," I corrected gently. "And speaking of audits, Brittany, I love what you have done with the place. It takes a lot of courage to host a party in a property that is currently flagged for illegal occupation in the county database." The room gasped. Brittany's eyes bulged. "How dare you? This is my husband's family home." "Is it?" I asked, pulling a folded document from my blazer pocket. "Because according to this, the leaseholder is M&J Holdings, and M&J Holdings just filed a police report for unauthorized entry and theft of services against a Mr. Darius and Mrs. Brittany Wilson." I placed the paper on the entry table next to a vase of hydrangeas. "Enjoy the tea, ladies. I wouldn't get too comfortable. The sheriff usually serves the official notice within 48 hours. The silence in the living room was absolute, broken only by the sound of Brittany's breathing, which was becoming increasingly ragged. She stared at the eviction notice I had placed next to the hydrangeas, as if it were a radioactive isotope. The women of the PTA, who just moments ago were sipping her cheap champagne and admiring her stolen lifestyle, now took a collective half-step back. In the high-stakes world of Atlanta society, the smell of poverty is repelling, but the stench of fraud is social suicide. Brittany tried to laugh, a high-pitched manic sound that made everyone cringe. "This is ridiculous," she stammered, grabbing the paper and crumpling it in her fist. "It is obviously a forgery." "Nia is known for her little jokes. She is just jealous that Marcus chose me to manage the estate." She turned to Mrs. Vance, her eyes pleading for an ally. "Principal Vance, surely you do not believe this disgruntled ex-wife over a registered parent." Mrs. Vance set her teacup down on the saucer with a deliberate click. She did not look at Brittany. She looked at me with a reverence usually reserved for heads of state. "Actually, Brittany, I would trust Nia with my life. In fact, I already trust her with something far more important, my retirement fund." A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Mrs. Vance adjusted her pearls and addressed the room, her voice carrying the natural authority of an educator. "Last year, when the school's endowment fund was targeted by that offshore phishing scheme, we thought we had lost $3 million. The police were useless. The banks were stalling. It was Nia who tracked the digital footprint. She recovered every single cent within 48 hours. She did it pro bono from a laptop in her kitchen while balancing a toddler on her hip." Mrs. Vance turned her cold gaze back to Brittany. So if Nia says this house is under foreclosure and that you are illegally occupying it, I suggest you start packing boxes instead of throwing parties. I do not associate with criminals, Brittany. And neither does the Buckhead Preparatory Academy. The shift in the room was palpable. It was a physical migration of power. The women turned their backs on Brittany, forming a semicircle around me. They looked at my structured Alexander McQueen blazer, realizing for the first time that the fabric was Italian wool, not the department store blend they had assumed. They looked at my posture, relaxed and commanding, and then at Brittany, who was sweating through her floral dress, clutching a crumpled eviction notice. One of the mothers, a woman named Caroline, who sat on the charity gala committee, stepped forward. "Nia," she said, her voice dripping with newfound sweetness. "I had no idea you were in forensic accounting. We are actually looking for a new treasurer for the winter ball. The previous one was a bit disorganized. Would you consider joining the board?" I smiled, not at Caroline, but at Brittany, who was watching her social standing disintegrate in real time. "I am afraid my schedule is quite full, Caroline," I said smoothly. "I am currently overseeing a federal investigation into international wire fraud. It takes up a lot of my time. But perhaps Brittany can help. She seems to have a lot of free time now that her husband is unemployed." Brittany let out a strangled sob. "Get out!" she screamed, pointing at the door. "Get out of my house!" "It is not your house, Brittany," I said, leaning in close enough so only she could smell the expensive Santal perfume I was wearing. "It never was. You are just a guest who overstayed her welcome. And the checkout time is approaching fast." I turned to Mrs. Vance. "Shall we go, Eleanor? The air in here is getting a bit stale." We walked out together, leaving Brittany alone in the center of the room, surrounded by half-eaten quiches and the ruin of her reputation. As we reached the car, Mrs. Vance squeezed my hand. "That was ruthless, Nia," she said. I nodded, opening the car door. "It was necessary, Eleanor. They mistook my silence for weakness. I am just correcting the record." As Mrs. Vance and I stepped onto the porch, the muffled sounds of Brittany screaming at the caterers drifted through the open door. She was trying to salvage the wreckage of her party, demanding the servers refill champagne glasses for guests who were already fleeing toward their cars. The social atmosphere had curdled instantly, but I knew that in the high-stakes ecosystem of Buckhead, rumors needed a specific kind of fuel to burn down a reputation completely. I needed a carrier pigeon. I found her lingering by the manicured boxwoods near the driveway. Mrs. Higgins, the president of the Homeowners Association, and a woman who knew the credit score of every family within a 3-mile radius. She was pretending to inspect a wilting hydrangea, but her ear was cocked toward the house, desperate for context to explain the eviction notice she had just seen. I slowed my pace, signaling Mrs. Vance to wait a moment. I put on my best expression of pained familial concern. "Oh, Mrs. Higgins," I said softly, stopping right next to her. "I am so terribly sorry you had to witness that display inside. It is just such a tragic situation for the family." Mrs. Higgins spun around, her eyes wide and hungry. "Tragic," she repeated, leaning in so close I could smell her lavender hairspray. "Whatever do you mean?" Nia Brittany said Marcus gifted them the estate before he left for his European sabbatical. I let out a heavy, rehearsed sigh and looked back at the house with wet eyes. Marcus wanted to help them, truly he did. But he forgot to mention the $300,000 in lien holdbacks attached to the title. When he fled the country, the bank called the note due immediately. I lowered my voice to a stage whisper that I knew would be audible to the 3 other mothers pretending to wait for the valet nearby. "Brittany and Darius do not own this home, Mrs. Higgins. They are essentially squatting in a foreclosure." Higgins gasped, clutching the pearls at her throat. "Squatters. In Tuxedo Park. But surely they can refinance." I shook my head sadly. With what credit Darius has troubles, with gambling debts, and Brittany has never held a job. The bank has already scheduled the sheriff for Friday morning. It is heartbreaking, really. I fear they will be escorted out in handcuffs if they resist. I reached into my purse and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. I pressed it into Mrs. Higgins's hand. Please, if you see Brittany later, give her this. Tell her to buy the twins a warm meal. I hate to think of my nephews going hungry, just because their parents are too proud to admit they are destitute. Mrs. Higgins looked at the $20 bill as if it were a smoking gun. She looked at the house with absolute horror. Illegal occupants, she muttered. Driving down our property values. This is a security risk. I must alert the board immediately. She did not even say goodbye. She scurried toward her Tesla, her phone already pressed to her ear, dialing the first of 50 people she would call within the hour. By sunset, the story would not just be that Brittany was being evicted. It would be that she was a destitute squatter living in filth. I walked to the waiting town car and slid into the leather seat next to Mrs. Vance. She watched Mrs. Higgins peeling out of the driveway with a bemused expression. "You are terrifying, Nia," she said. I checked my watch. The sun was high and I had one more loose end to tie up before lunch. I tapped on the partition to the driver. "Take us to the Capitol Grill downtown," I said. "I need to have a word with the owner about his general manager." Darius straightened his silk tie in the mirror of the staff restroom, admiring the knot. Despite the frantic texts from Brittany about eviction notices and squatters' rights, he felt secure within the mahogany walls of the Capitol Grill. Here he was, the general manager. He was the man who decided which table got the complimentary appetizer and which waiter got the lucrative Friday night shifts. He splashed cold water on his face, washing away the stress of the morning. Nia was bluffing, he told himself. She was just a bitter woman trying to scare them. He walked out onto the floor, snapping his fingers at a busboy. "Table 4 needs water. Move it." "Darius," the hostess whispered, her face pale. She refused to meet his eyes. "Mr. Moretti is in the private dining room. He is asking for you. He says it is urgent." Darius frowned. Giovanni Moretti, the owner of the restaurant group, rarely visited during the lunch rush, unless it was to hand out bonuses. Darius smoothed his jacket, assuming he was about to be praised for the quarterly sales figures. He strode into the private room with his signature swagger. "Gio, good to see you. To what do I owe the pleasure? Should I decant the '05 Camus?" Mr. Moretti did not smile. He sat at the head of the long table, flanked by 3 men and a woman in dark, sharp suits. They were not customers. They had laptops open and stacks of paper spread out over the white tablecloths. On the center of the table sat 3 empty wooden wine crates. "Sit down, Darius," Moretti said, his voice dangerously quiet. Darius laughed nervously, pulling out a chair. "What is this, an interrogation? Did I forget to comp a VIP?" "This is a forensic audit," the woman in the suit said. She did not look up from her laptop. "We were hired by the parent company to investigate inventory discrepancies. Specifically, the disappearance of $45,000 worth of vintage Bordeaux and Screaming Eagle Cabernet over the last 18 months. The blood drained from Darius's face. He knew exactly where those bottles were. Some were in his basement, some had been consumed at Brittany's dinner parties, and a few were currently sitting in the trunk of the Mercedes he had stolen from Nia yesterday. That must be a mistake," Darius stammered, sweat prickling his hairline. "The inventory system has been glitchy. I put in a ticket for IT last week." "It is not a glitch," the woman said, sliding a thick report across the table. "We found the digital footprint of the manual overrides used to alter the stock counts. The user ID was yours, Darius. And the timestamps matched the security footage of you carrying crates out the back door after closing." Moretti stood up, his face red with betrayal. "I treated you like family, Darius. I gave you this job when you had nothing. And you steal from me. You steal my livelihood to impress your friends." "Gio, please let me explain." Darius pleaded, his arrogance evaporating instantly. "It was just a few bottles. I was going to pay you back. I can fix this." "You are fired," Moretti spat. "Effective immediately. And these auditors are recommending we press charges for grand larceny and embezzlement." Darius looked down at the report, desperate to find a flaw, a way out. His eyes landed on the signature block at the bottom of the executive summary. Audit prepared by NB Forensic Solutions, LLC. Lead analyst Nia Brooks. Darius stopped breathing. Naya, the sister-in-law he had mocked for being broke, the woman whose car he was driving, she had not just audited the books. She was the silent hand that guided the axe. "Get him out of here," Moretti barked. Two security guards stepped forward. "Wait, you can't do this," Darius yelled as they grabbed his arms. "My wife is sick, I have kids." They dragged him through the main dining room. The lunch crowd filled with the city's elite watched in silence as the general manager was hauled out the service exit. The guards threw him onto the wet asphalt of the alleyway. "And don't come back," one guard said, tossing Darius's personal cell phone onto his chest. Darius scrambled to his feet, dusting off his torn suit. He was shaking. He grabbed his phone to call Brittany to scream to panic. But as he unlocked the screen, a notification popped up from the Mercedes connected app. Vehicle immobilization activated. Reason reported stolen. Location shared with police. He looked up at the parking lot. The silver Mercedes was there, but the lights were flashing and the engine was dead. In the distance, the wail of a siren grew louder. Darius realized with terrifying clarity that Nia wasn't just taking her car back, she was taking his freedom. Here is the continuation of the script, specifically, segment 16 following your requirements. The automatic glass doors of the Buckhead Vitality Institute slid open with a soft hush, welcoming my mother-in-law into the climate-controlled sanctuary she visited every Tuesday. Louise adjusted her oversized sunglasses and marched toward the front desk, expecting the usual fawning adoration. She was here for her weekly vitamin infusion and lymphatic massage, a $300 ritual she claimed was medically necessary for her delicate constitution. After the disaster at Brittany's tea party, she felt entitled to some pampering. She did not wait in line. She walked straight to the VIP counter, tapping her manicured nails on the marble surface. Chloe, the head receptionist, looked up from her computer. Usually Chloe would have a glass of cucumber water ready before Louise even reached the desk. Today, Chloe looked uncomfortable. "I am ready for my suite," Louise announced, tossing her platinum membership card onto the counter. "And tell the masseuse to focus on my shoulders. The stress my family is putting me through is simply criminal." Chloe picked up the card but did not swipe it. She held it with 2 fingers, her expression pained. "Mrs. Wilson, I am afraid we cannot check you in today." Louise laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "Do not be ridiculous, Chloe. I have a standing appointment. If the suite is not ready, kick whoever is in there out. My son pays a premium for priority access. It is not the room availability." "Ma'am," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "It is the payment method. When we ran the pre-authorization this morning, the system flagged the account. The policy has been canceled." "Canceled!" Louise screeched, causing 2 women in the waiting area to look up from their magazines. "That is impossible. My son Marcus pays this bill annually. He is a wealthy international developer. There must be a glitch in your cheap software." "Run it again. I have run it 3 times." "Mrs. Wilson," Chloe said firmly, turning the monitor so Louise could see. "The policy status is terminated. The primary account holder issued the cancellation request yesterday afternoon. The note here says financial restructuring due to divorce proceedings." Louise stared at the screen. The primary account holder listed was not Marcus Brooks. It was Nia Brooks. The realization hit her like a physical slap. For 5 years, Marcus had bragged about taking care of his mother, about treating her like a queen, but he had never paid a dime. It was Nia, the daughter-in-law she called boring, the woman she mocked for not having style. Nia had been quietly funding Louise's entire lifestyle while Louise treated her like hired help. Louise snatched her phone from her purse, her hands shaking with rage. She dialed Marcus first. It went straight to voicemail. She dialed him again. Voicemail. Desperate and humiliated, she dialed the one number she had sworn never to call again. I was sitting in the back of the town car reviewing the forensic report on Darius when my phone rang. I saw the name, the matriarch, flash on the screen. I signaled Mrs. Vance to stay silent and put the call on speaker. Nia Louise shouted the moment I connected. What have you done to my insurance? I am standing at the Vitality Institute, and they are telling me my policy is cancelled. Fix this immediately. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Hello, Louise. I am afraid I cannot fix it. You see, that policy is for family members. And since you made it very clear yesterday that I am not family and that I am just a boring secretary who holds your son back, I decided to stop holding him back. I removed myself from your financial equation. You ungrateful girl. Louise spat. Marcus will hear about this. He pays for this membership. No, Louise, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. Marcus has not paid a bill since 2019. I paid for the membership. I paid for your condo fees. I paid for the lease on your Lexus. Every luxury you have enjoyed for the last 5 years came from my paycheck, not his imaginary real estate deals. But do not worry. I am sure Jackie can cover your massage. I saw her buying a Hermes bag yesterday, so she must have plenty of cash. I am sick, Nia. Louise wailed, realizing her leverage was gone. I need my treatments. Then I suggest you ask your son to wire you the money. I said cold. Oh wait, he can't. I froze those accounts too. Goodbye, Louise. I hung up the phone. On the other end of the line, in the sterile lobby of the spa, Louise slowly lowered the phone. Chloe was looking at her with pity. I am sorry, Mrs. Wilson, Chloe said softly. Can I call you a taxi? Since your driver service was also linked to the account, it has been suspended as well. Louise looked around the lobby. The luxury she felt entitled to was dissolving around her. She had no car, no treatment, no son to save her. She had bet on the wrong horse, and now she had to walk home in her expensive unpaid-for shoes. The interior of the Lincoln Town car was quiet, a hermetically sealed bubble of air-conditioned luxury gliding down West Pace's Ferry Road. I was in the middle of checking my email for the confirmation of the bank freeze when my phone illuminated the dim cabin. The screen displayed a photo of Marcus tanned and smiling on a boat from our honeymoon. It was a FaceTime request. I held a finger to my lips, signaling Mrs. Vance to remain absolutely silent. She nodded, pressing her lips together, her eyes wide with anticipation. I accepted the call, but kept the camera angle low, showing only my chin and the nondescript gray ceiling of the car, careful not to reveal the leather seats or the formidable school principal sitting next to me. What is wrong with you? Marcus screamed the moment the connection stabilized. The video quality was grainy, but I could see he was sitting at a sun-drenched outdoor cafe, a half-eaten paella in front of him. Brittany just texted me in tears. She is at Lenox Mall with the twins, and her card got declined at the register. Do you know how embarrassing that is for my family? I let my voice tremble, pitching it perfectly between fear and exhaustion. Marcus, I do not know what to tell you. The banks are acting strange. They locked everything. I tried to buy diapers this morning, and I could not. Do not give me that excuses crap, Marcus shouted, causing a waiter in the background to look over in alarm. I promised Brittany I would cover her expenses while I am away. It is the least I can do since you are making her life hell about the house. Call the bank and unblock the authorized user card, Nia. Now. I cannot, I whined, wiping a non-existent tear from my cheek. I have no money, Marcus. You took the savings, you took the checking account, you even took the equity line. I do not have enough for rent. I am sleeping at a cheap motel near the airport. Marcus chewed on a piece of shrimp, a smug, satisfied grin spreading across his face. A motel? Wow, how the mighty have fallen. So what are you doing to fix it? You always have a plan, Nia. You are the smart one, right? I am on my way to a job interview, I lied. Staring out the window as we passed a high-end jewelry boutique. There is a diner on Buford Highway hiring dishwashers. It pays $7 an hour plus tips. I figured if I work double shifts, maybe next week I can send Brittany $20. Marcus threw his head back and laughed. It was a cruel, guttural sound that filled the car. Sure, you, the woman who thought she was too good for my friends. That is rich. That is poetic justice, Nia. You are finally learning your place. You are nothing without me providing for you. You are just the help. Please, Marcus. I begged, laying it on thick. Can you not send just a little back? Leo is hungry. Not a chance, he sneered, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. Consider this a lesson in gratitude. You scrub those plates, Nia. And when your hands are raw and cracked, maybe then you will appreciate what you lost. Maybe then I will consider sending you a few scraps. He ended the call. The screen went black. I lowered the phone, and the trembling facade dropped instantly. My face returned to its natural state of cool indifference. Mrs. Vance was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, clutching her pearls. That was terrifying, she whispered. You sounded so broken. He needs to feel superior, I said, sliding the phone back into my structured bag. If he thinks I am defeated, he will get careless. He will keep spending money he does not have, thinking the well is still full. He does not know I just cut the water line. I tapped the partition to the driver. Change of destination. Take us to the private investigator's office on Piedmont. I need to pick up some photographs. Mrs. Vance adjusted her glasses. Photographs. Insurance, I replied, checking my lipstick in the compact mirror. Marcus is not the only one in Barcelona enjoying the local flavor. And I have a feeling Jackie is about to provide us with the final piece of the puzzle. The office of Cole's Strategic Intelligence was not located in a smoky back alley. It was situated on the 35th floor of a steel skyscraper in Midtown, sandwiched between a corporate law firm and a hedge fund. This was where the wealthy of Atlanta came when they needed dirt that the police could not or would not find. I instructed the driver to keep the engine running, and Mrs. Vance comfortable with the climate control. Some parts of this war were too dirty, even for the principal of a prep school. Cole was waiting for me. He was a former intelligence officer who dressed like a university professor, wearing tweed jackets and wire-rimmed glasses. He did not waste time with pleasantries. As soon as I closed the soundproof door, he slid a heavy tablet across his mahogany desk. You were right, Nia, Cole said, tapping the screen. Your husband's girlfriend is not just looking for love. She is looking for insurance. I looked down at the high-resolution images. They were taken yesterday in Barcelona, mere hours after Marcus and Jackie had landed. While Marcus was presumably arguing with the bank or sleeping off his jet lag, Jackie was busy. The photos showed her on the deck of a superyacht docked at Port Vell. She was wearing a bikini that left nothing to the imagination, and she was not alone. A man was applying sunscreen to her back. He was older, silver-haired, and wearing a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Marcus's entire stolen nest egg. Who is he? I asked, zooming in on the man's face. Dmitry Volkov, Cole replied. Russian shipping magnate. He keeps the yacht in Barcelona year-round. Our surveillance indicates Jackie has been messaging him on an encrypted app for 3 months, before she even convinced Marcus to leave you. I let out a low, humorless laugh. So Marcus was not her soulmate. He was just her flight ticket. Exactly, Cole said, swiping to the next image. It showed Jackie kissing Volkov on the cheek, holding a glass of champagne. But here is the kicker, Nia. We intercepted a text she sent to Volkov's burner phone right before she boarded the flight with Marcus. It read, "Bringing the package. We'll dump him once the cash clears. Keep the champagne cold." I stared at the text. It was brutal. It was cold-blooded. It was exactly something I would have respected if it weren't destroying my family. Marcus thought he was the king running off with his queen. In reality, he was just a mule. Jackie was using him to smuggle the cash out of the country, planning to hop onto a bigger, better boat the moment they landed. This is perfect, I whispered, feeling a surge of dark satisfaction. Marcus thinks he is leaving me for a younger, hotter version of a wife. He has no idea he is sleeping next to a shark who is already chewing on his leg. Cole handed me a USB drive. I have all the metadata, the chat logs, and the geotagged photos. Do you want me to send them to Marcus? No. I said, closing my hand around the drive. Not yet. If I send them now, he might come running back to Atlanta begging for forgiveness. I need him to stay in Spain. I need him to be arrested on foreign soil. I will use this when he is sitting in a jail cell wondering why his girlfriend won't post his bail. I stood up, tucking the evidence into my purse. How much do I owe you, Cole? On the house, Cole said, cleaning his glasses. You helped me with that IRS audit last year. Remember? Besides watching you work, is payment enough? Just promise me one thing. When you drop the hammer, make sure it is loud. I walked back to the elevator, my heels silent on the plush carpet. I had the financial evidence to jail him. I had the eviction notice to break his family. And now I had the photos to break his heart. The hammer wasn't just going to be loud, it was going to be nuclear. While I was busy gathering ammunition against Jackie, the walls were finally closing in on my sister-in-law back at the estate. Brittany had spent the last hour scrubbing red wine stains out of the white carpet, a souvenir from her disastrous tea party. She was likely telling herself that the eviction notice I had planted was a fake, a desperate prank from a jealous woman. She probably convinced herself that Marcus, the golden boy of the family, would never let anything happen to the house he had gifted them. Ignorance must have been bliss right up until the doorbell rang. It was not a guest coming to apologize for leaving early. It was a man in a cheap suit holding a thick manila envelope. Brittany opened the door, expecting a delivery from Neiman Marcus. Instead, the man shoved the packet into her chest. "Brittany Wilson," he asked, "you have been served." Before she could even demand an explanation, he turned and walked back to his unmarked sedan. Brittany stood in the doorway, the heavy, humid air of Atlanta pressing down on her, and tore open the seal. It was not a love letter. It was a civil lawsuit filed by a major credit card issuer. The plaintiff was seeking immediate repayment of $50,000 plus legal fees. Brittany frowned, confused. She had her own credit cards, sure, but the limits were low and she barely used them. She scanned the document, her eyes catching the phrase, joint liability and primary guarantor. Then she saw the date of the agreement. It was from 3 days ago. The memory must have hit her like a freight train. The night before Marcus left for Spain, he had presented her with a stack of digital documents on his iPad. Just standard liability waivers for the house, he had said, flashing that charming smile. "We need you to sign off on the insurance so you are covered if anything breaks while I am gone." Brittany, blinded by the prospect of living in a mansion she could never afford, had signed every line without reading a single word. She had not signed insurance waivers. She had signed a personal guarantee for a high-interest credit line Marcus had opened to fund his getaway. She ran into the kitchen and grabbed the landline, her hands trembling so hard she could barely dial the customer service number listed on the summons. When the agent answered, Brittany unleashed her signature Karen voice. "This is a mistake," she screamed. "My brother-in-law, Marcus Brooks, is the account holder. I just signed as a witness." I can imagine the silence on the other end of the line before the agent delivered the fatal blow. "Ma'am, the account was opened in your name, Mr. Brooks is listed as the authorized user, but you are the primary obligor. The authorized user maxed out the limit in 48 hours on transactions in Barcelona. Since the primary payments failed, the debt is now yours." Brittany dropped the phone. The receiver dangled by its cord, swinging back and forth like a pendulum counting down her demise. She had always called me stupid for working a corporate job while she stayed home and managed her social standing. She had mocked me for reading the fine print. Now the brother-in-law she worshipped had not just left her homeless. He had saddled her with 50 grand of debt she had no way to pay. She slumped against the kitchen island, sliding down until she hit the cold floor. For the first time in her life, Brittany realized she was not the main character in a fairy tale. She was just the collateral damage in a con artist's exit strategy. And the worst part was, she had signed her own death warrant. I sat in the back of the town car, the city of Atlanta blurring past the tinted windows. I pulled out my secure tablet. It was time to light the fuse on the other side of the Atlantic. I opened a Proton Mail account, untraceable and encrypted. I typed the subject line, "Urgent financial disclosure regarding Marcus Brooks." I attached the property deeds. I attached the vehicle registrations. I attached the foreclosure notice for the house he claimed to own. And finally, I attached a screenshot of his bank balance from yesterday morning showing the federal freeze order. I typed a short message. The man you are with is not a millionaire. He is an unemployed property manager living off his wife's credit. The funds he transferred have been flagged by the FBI. If you stay with him, you will be implicated in federal wire fraud. Check his wallet. If the black card is gone, so is the money. I hit send. Thousands of miles away in the master suite of the Villa Rosa, Jackie was lying by the pool. Marcus was inside, pacing the living room, screaming at yet another bank representative on the phone. Jackie was bored. Her phone pinged. She glanced at the screen, expecting a DM from her Russian admirer. Instead, she saw the email. She sat up, adjusting her designer sunglasses. She tapped the attachment. The first document was a deed to the Buckhead mansion. Owner listed as Nia Brooks via NB Holdings LLC. The second was a vehicle title for the Porsche Marcus claimed was his. Owner listed as Nia Brooks. Jackie felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She scrolled down to the bank screenshot. Status frozen. Reason criminal investigation. She looked through the glass doors. Marcus was off the phone now, pouring himself a drink. His hand was shaking. She remembered the declined card at Hermes. She remembered his sweat. It all made sense. He was not having banking glitches. He was broke. He was a fraud. She stood up and walked into the villa. Marcus looked up, forcing a smile. Hey, babe. Just cleared everything up with the bank. Money will be flowing again by tomorrow. Jackie did not smile back. She looked at his wrist. Where is your Rolex? She asked. Marcus froze. Oh, I left it in the bedroom. Why? I want to see it. Jackie said, her voice flat. And I want to see your Amex Black card, the one you used to book this place. Marcus swallowed hard. Babe, why are you being like this? I told you I am handling it. Jackie crossed her arms. You are not handling anything, Marcus. You are lying. She held up her phone. Who is NB Holdings? And why is your wife's name on the deed to our house? Marcus turned pale. Who sent you that? It does not matter, Jackie snapped. You told me you were the boss. You told me she was a nobody. But it looks like she owns you. And if she owns you, that means you have nothing for me. She turned around and walked back to the bedroom, slamming the door. She was not going to wait for the FBI. She unlocked her phone and opened the chat with Dmitry, the Russian billionaire. Plans changed, she typed. Pick me up tonight and bring the yacht closer. Marcus stood in the living room, the ice melting in his glass. He had lost his money. He was losing his girl. And somewhere in Atlanta, he knew Nia was pulling the strings. The paranoia set in. He was not just broke, he was being hunted. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite at the St. Regis, illuminating the fresh fruit platter and the imported toys I had ordered for Leo. But across town in the house she was about to lose, Brittany was orchestrating her most vicious attack yet. She realized she could not beat me financially, so she decided to destroy me maternally. She picked up the phone and dialed the Department of Family and Children Services. I need to report an emergency, Brittany told the operator, her voice trembling with a practiced hysteria. My nephew is in immediate danger. His mother, Nia Brooks, has suffered a psychotic break after her husband left her. She is currently homeless, living out of a car with a 3-year-old. I saw bruises on the child yesterday. Please, you have to save him before she hurts him. 2 hours later, there was a sharp, authoritative knock at my hotel door. I checked the peephole, expecting the concierge. Instead, I saw a woman in a navy blue blazer holding a clipboard and a police officer standing behind her. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to slow. I opened the door. Mrs. Brooks, the woman said, stepping into the room without waiting for an invitation. I am caseworker Davis with Child Protective Services. We received a credible report regarding the safety of your son Leo. I need to see him immediately. I stepped back, allowing them to enter. Miss Davis walked in with her pen poised, expecting to find a squalid room filled with trash bags and a starving child. She stopped dead in her tracks. She was standing in a 3,000-square-foot suite with marble floors and a grand piano. In the center of the living room, Leo was sitting on a plush rug building a tower with high-end wooden blocks while watching educational cartoons on a 60-inch television. He was wearing clean-pressed pajamas and eating organic strawberries from a silver bowl. Ms. Davis lowered her clipboard. She looked at the police officer, who looked equally confused. She looked at the report in her hand, then back at the room. The report stated you were residing in a vehicle, Ms. Davis said, her voice losing its edge. It stated the child was malnourished and living in unsanitary conditions. I walked over to the desk and picked up a leather folio. I handed it to her. Ms. Davis, I said calmly. My sister-in-law, Brittany Wilson, made that call, didn't she? She is currently being evicted from my property and is lashing out. As you can see, we are not homeless. This is a prepaid 30-day stay at a 5-star hotel. My son has a private pediatrician on call, and we just finished a breakfast that cost more than Brittany's car payment. Ms. Davis walked over to Leo. She knelt down and checked his arms and legs. There were no bruises. He smiled at her and offered her a strawberry. She stood up and closed her file. This is clearly a malicious report, Mrs. Brooks, she said, her expression hardening. I apologize for the intrusion. We take false reporting very seriously. This wastes resources for children who are actually in danger. I nodded. I understand. But since you are already in the neighborhood, Ms. Davis, I think you should take a look at the environment my nephew is living in at 424 Tuxedo Road. I pulled a file from my briefcase. It contained photos I had taken yesterday at the tea party. Photos of prescription pill bottles left open on the counter within reach of children. Photos of wine stains on the carpet. And a copy of Brittany's latest pharmacy records showing refills for Xanax and OxyContin that far exceeded normal dosage. Brittany thinks I am unfit, I asked, handing the file to the officer. You might want to check on the welfare of the twins. Their mother is under significant financial stress, and from what I saw yesterday, she is self-medicating to cope. Ms. Davis took the file. She looked at the photos, then at me. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks, she said. We will pay the Wilson residents a visit immediately. They left the suite. I locked the door and sat down on the floor next to Leo. Brittany had tried to take my son. She had crossed the final line. I kissed Leo's forehead and picked up my phone. It was time to accelerate the eviction. She wanted a war involving children. She was about to lose custody of her own. Ms. Davis stood in the center of the living room, her heels sinking into the plush Persian rug. She looked from the tray of organic cut fruit on the marble coffee table to Leo, who was happily constructing a fortress out of imported wooden blocks. The morning sun flooded the suite, highlighting the crisp, clean pajamas my son wore and the peaceful, orderly atmosphere of the room. It was the antithesis of the chaotic, neglectful environment Brittany had described in her frantic call. This is certainly not a vehicle, Ms. Davis murmured, closing the file folder she had been clutching like a shield. The report stated you were transient, Mrs. Brooks. It claimed the child was unwashed and showing signs of malnutrition. I walked over to the sideboard and poured a glass of sparkling water, offering it to the social worker. The person who made that call is currently undergoing a significant mental health crisis, I said, my voice steady and devoid of malice. Brittany Wilson is losing her home due to financial mismanagement. She is lashing out at the only target she can reach. Me. Ms. Davis took the water, her posture relaxing. We see this often in high-conflict family disputes. Weaponizing Child Protective Services is a felony, Mrs. Brooks. If we determine the call was made in bad faith, we will pursue charges. I sat down on the velvet armchair, crossing my legs. I am not interested in pressing charges for the false report, Ms. Davis. I am interested in the safety of the children involved, and I am not talking about Leo. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a black binder. I placed it on the table between us. I am a forensic accountant. I deal in fax numbers and paper trails. When I was reviewing the family accounts prior to my separation from my husband, I noticed a disturbing pattern in Brittany's discretionary spending. Ms. Davis set her glass down. What kind of pattern? I opened the binder. Inside were rows of credit card transactions highlighted in neon yellow. I pointed to the dates. Multiple pharmacy visits. 5 different locations in a 10-mile radius, all visited within 48 hours. Cash withdrawals at ATMs located inside these pharmacies. And here I said, flipping the page to a series of photographs I had taken during yesterday's tea party. The photos were high resolution. They showed the kitchen counter at the Tuxedo Road estate. In the background behind the champagne flutes were 3 orange prescription bottles with the caps off. She leaves them open, I said softly. On the counter, within reach of her 6-year-old twins. I zoomed in on one photo. You can see the label here. Oxycodone. And this one is Xanax. I cross-referenced the prescribers. She is doctor shopping Ms. Davis. She is mixing opioids with alcohol daily. Yesterday, I watched her consume 3 glasses of wine while these bottles sat open next to her car keys. Ms. Davis picked up the binder, her professional demeanor shifting from investigative to alarmed. She studied the timestamps on the receipts and the photos. I fear for the twins. I continued delivering the final blow. If she is evicted on Friday, as the sheriff's schedule indicates, she will be under immense stress. A woman with a substance abuse problem facing homelessness is a volatile combination. I am safe here. My son is safe. But I cannot say the same for my nephews. Ms. Davis stood up abruptly. She looked at the police officer who had been waiting by the door. Officer, we need to mobilize. This situation has just escalated from a welfare check to an immediate intervention. She turned to me. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. You may have just saved those children. We are heading to the Wilson residence now. I watched them leave, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. Brittany had tried to send the wolves to my door to take my son. She did not realize that I was the one who fed the wolves. And now they were hungry for the truth. I picked up a block and handed it to Leo. Good job, baby, I whispered. Mommy just cleared the board. 45 minutes after leaving the pristine sanctuary of the St. Regis, Ms. Davis stood on the front porch of 424 Tuxedo Road. The colonial mansion looked impressive from the street, but up close the cracks were showing. A trash can had been knocked over near the garage, spilling takeout containers onto the driveway, and the front door was slightly ajar. Ms. Davis signaled the police officer to stand ready, then knocked firmly on the wood. Brittany Wilson threw the door open almost immediately. She was still wearing the floral dress from the tea party, but now it was wrinkled and stained with wine. Her hair was unwashed, and her eyes had the glassy pinpoint look of someone who had taken too much medication to numb the reality of their life. When she saw the badge on Ms. Davis's belt, a twisted smile broke across her face. Thank God, Brittany slurred, leaning against the doorframe. You guys moved fast. Did you get her? Did you arrest Nia? Is my nephew safe from that psycho? Ms. Davis did not smile. She stepped forward, forcing Brittany to retreat into the foyer. We are not here for Mrs. Brooks, Brittany. We are here to investigate a report of child neglect and substance abuse regarding your children, Tyler and Tanner. Brittany's smile vanished. She blinked, trying to process the words through the chemical fog in her brain. What? No, you have the wrong address. I am the caller. I am the victim here. Nia is the one living in a car. The officer stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The smell hit them instantly. It was a sour mix of stale champagne, old fast food, and something burning. Ms. Davis scanned the living room. The wreckage of the tea party had not been cleaned up. Half-eaten quiches sat on the coffee table, swarming with ants. A precariously stacked tower of pizza boxes leaned against the antique fireplace. Where are the children, Mrs. Wilson? Ms. Davis asked, her voice sharp. They are fine, Brittany snapped, waving a hand vaguely toward the back of the house. They are playing. We are just having a lazy day. You cannot just barge in here. Do you know who my husband is? Ms. Davis ignored her and walked toward the kitchen. The scene was exactly as Nia had described in her briefing, only worse. The granite countertops were cluttered with dirty dishes that had clearly been there for days. And there, right next to a spilled sippy cup of juice, were the orange prescription bottles. The caps were off. Ms. Davis pulled a pair of latex gloves from her pocket and picked up the bottle. Oxycodone. Date filled 2 days ago. Quantity 60, remaining 12. She looked at Brittany, who had followed her into the kitchen, swaying slightly. "You have gone through 48 pills in 2 days," Brittany Ms. Davis stated, holding up the bottle. "And you left them open on a counter that a 6-year-old can reach." "That is my back medication," Brittany shrieked, lunging for the bottle. The officer stepped in between them, blocking her path. "Give that back. You are stealing my medicine." Ms. Davis moved past her, pushing open the door to the den. The curtains were drawn, making the room pitch black at noon. The television was blaring at max volume. On the floor, amidst a pile of laundry and candy wrappers, sat the twins. They were wearing only their underwear. They looked up with wide, fearful eyes. They were thin pale, and when the officer turned on the light, Ms. Davis saw the red welts of a rash on the younger twin's arm that had gone untreated. "Mommy," one of them whispered, "we are hungry." Brittany stood in the doorway, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "It is not what it looks like," she pleaded, her voice cracking into hysteria. The maid called out sick. "We are just in transition. Marcus is sending money tomorrow." Ms. Davis turned to the officer. "Note the conditions. Immediate hazard to welfare. Access to narcotics, lack of food, unsanitary living environment." She turned to Brittany, her face cold as stone. "Mrs. Wilson, I am placing your children in emergency protective custody. You have 5 minutes to pack a bag for them." Brittany screamed. "No, you cannot take my kids. This is Nia's fault. She set me up. She is the devil. She is not the one who left opioids next to a juice cup," Ms. Davis replied calmly. "Move, Mrs. Wilson, or the officer will move you." Darius Wilson arrived at his family estate in a taxi, his suit torn from the scuffle at the restaurant, only to find 3 police cruisers blocking the driveway. The red and blue lights were flashing, illuminating the faces of the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk. Mrs. Higgins was there, standing by the hedges, recording everything on her iPhone with a look of gleeful horror. Darius felt the bile rise in his throat. This was not just a bad day. This was a public execution of his social standing. He stormed through the open front door, ignoring the officer on the porch who tried to stop him. He walked straight into the living room where Ms. Davis was packing a duffel bag for the twins. He saw Brittany sobbing on the sofa, her face puffy and red, the open bottle of oxycodone sitting on the evidence table next to the officer. "What is going on?" Darius roared, his voice shaking the walls. "Why are the police taking my children?" Brittany looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. "Nia called them," she wailed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "She told them I was an addict. She told them we were starving." "Do something, Darius. Tell them who you are. Tell them this is a mistake." Darius looked around the room. He saw the pizza boxes stacked like the Tower of Pisa. He saw the wine stains on the carpet. He smelled the sour stench of neglect. For the first time, he did not see his wife as a victim. He saw her as a liability. He saw the reason he was losing the war against Nia. "Look at this place," Darius spat, kicking a pile of dirty laundry across the floor. "You are a disgrace, Brittany. I leave you alone for 2 days to handle the estate, and you turn it into a crack den." "No wonder Nia called CPS. You look like a junkie." Brittany stood up, her eyes narrowing. The sadness vanished, replaced by a feral chemical rage. "Do not talk to me about disgrace," she screamed, stepping into his personal space. "I am the one holding this family together while you play pretend businessman. I know about the wine, Darius. The valet texted me. You got fired for stealing. You are a thief." Darius's face turned purple. He slapped her hand away as she poked his chest. "I was providing for this family. While you were popping pills and buying clothes we cannot afford. You are useless, Brittany. You let Nia walk all over us." "You are a loser," Brittany shrieked, shoving him hard against the fireplace mantel. A vase crashed to the floor, shattering. Marcus is the only reason we have anything. And now that he is gone, you are nothing. You are just a broke waiter in a stolen suit. Darius lunged at her, grabbing her by the shoulders. I will kill you, he shouted. The officer tackled him instantly, slamming him onto the Persian rug with a bone-jarring thud. Another officer grabbed Brittany as she tried to claw at Darius's face, screaming profanities. That is enough, the sergeant yelled, pinning Darius's arm behind his back. Both of you are under arrest for domestic disturbance and disorderly conduct in the presence of minors. As the officers handcuffed them, dragging them out the front door, past the weeping twins who were being shielded by Ms. Davis, Darius saw Mrs. Higgins zooming in with her camera. He realized then that Nia had not just taken his house. She had turned his marriage into a spectacle, and the whole neighborhood was tuning in for the season finale. The sun rose on Friday morning over 424 Tuxedo Road, illuminating a household that had completely collapsed. Brittany and Darius had returned from the precinct at 3 a.m., released on their own recognizance after Mrs. Higgins's video of their brawl went viral on neighborhood watch apps. They were exhausted, smelling of the holding cell and clinging to the delusional hope that if they just locked the doors and ignored the world, the nightmare would end. They were wrong. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, a convoy of vehicles pulled into the driveway. It was not a social call. Leading the pack was a Fulton County Sheriff's cruiser, followed by two unmarked sedans and a large moving truck. I watched from my usual vantage point across the street, sipping a latte in the climate-controlled silence of my Lincoln. The deadline on the notice I planted at the tea party had expired. Sheriff Deputy Jackson, a man built like a linebacker with zero patience for buckhead drama, walked up the steps and pounded on the door. The sound echoed like gunshots in the quiet morning air. Sheriff's Department Jackson bellowed, "We have a writ of possession for this property. Open the door immediately." Inside, I imagined the panic. Brittany probably dropped her coffee. Darius likely scrambled to find a phone to call Marcus, who was currently sitting in a Spanish jail cell, unable to answer. After a long minute, the door creaked open. Darius stood there wearing the same torn suit from his arrest, his eyes bloodshot. "Officer, look," he stammered, holding up a hand. "We are resolving this. My brother is the owner. He is overseas. There has been a misunderstanding with the bank payments. We just need a few more days to wire the funds." Deputy Jackson did not blink. He held up a document with a court seal stamped in red ink. "There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Wilson. The foreclosure was finalized on Tuesday. The new owner, NB Holdings LLC, has perfected the title and obtained an immediate eviction order due to confirmed illegal occupancy and property damage. You have exactly 15 minutes to gather essential personal items and vacate the premises." Brittany pushed past Darius, her hair a bird's nest of tangles. "You cannot do this," she shrieked. "We have rights. We have children." "Your children are in state custody, ma'am," Jackson replied, his voice devoid of sympathy. "And unless you want to join them in the system, I suggest you step aside. My team is here to secure the asset." He signaled to the movers waiting by the truck. They were not gentle. They marched past Darius and Brittany like an invading army carrying empty boxes. They were not there to help the Wilsons pack. They were there to clear the house for the new owner. "But where are we supposed to go?" Brittany wailed, grabbing the doorframe as a deputy gently but firmly pried her fingers loose. "We have nowhere to go. This is our home." "It is not your home," Jackson said, handing her a copy of the writ. "It never was. You are trespassing." As the movers began hauling Darius's flat-screen TV and Brittany's collection of unpaid-for designer bags out to the curb, a black SUV pulled into the driveway behind the sheriff's cruiser. The rear door opened. I stepped out. I was wearing a white power suit and sunglasses. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my heels. Darius looked up, his face draining of color. Brittany stopped screaming. They watched me approach, the realization dawning on them slowly, painfully. I stopped in front of the deputy. Good morning, Deputy Jackson, I said, removing my sunglasses. I believe you are clearing this property for me. I am the sole proprietor of NB Holdings, and I am ready to take possession. I stood on the asphalt of the driveway, the morning sun reflecting off the hood of the sheriff's cruiser. Beside me stood Julian, the most ruthless litigator at Sterling Financial, holding a leather binder thick with the death warrants of Darius and Brittany's lifestyle. Darius looked at me, his eyes darting from my face to the NB Holdings logo on the paperwork. He looked like a man trying to read a map in a language he did not speak. You? Darius whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of confusion. You are the owner. But that is impossible. You are broke. Marcus took the savings. He took the checking account. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, enjoying the way he flinched. Marcus took the liquid cash, Darius. He emptied the accounts he knew about, but he didn't know about my trust. And he certainly didn't know about distressed debt purchasing. I gestured to the house behind him. When Marcus stopped paying the mortgage 6 months ago to fund his lifestyle, the bank flagged the note as toxic. They put the debt up for auction last week. I bought it. I bought the mortgage on my own home for 60 cents on the dollar through a shell company. NB Holdings. Nia Brooks Holdings. Brittany pushed past the deputy, her face a mask of desperation. You bought the debt. So what? We are family. Nia, you cannot just evict family. We have nowhere to go. The audacity of the word family coming from her mouth made me laugh. It was a cold, sharp sound. Family? I asked, tilting my head. Was I family on Tuesday when you threw my son's clothes into the mud during a thunderstorm? Was I family when you called the police and tried to have me arrested for trespassing in the home I paid for? Was I family when you called Child Protective Services and tried to have Leo taken away from me? Brittany opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. You ceased to be family the moment you decided to be my executioner. Now, I am just the bank, and the bank is foreclosing. Julian stepped forward, opening the binder. According to the terms of the deed in lieu of foreclosure, all personal property remaining inside the dwelling is now considered collateral against the outstanding debt and damages to the property. This includes furniture, electronics, and personal collections. Darius's eyes went wide. Wait. No. My watch collection. My Rolexes. They are in the safe in the master bedroom. Those are worth more than the car. They are not your watches anymore, Mr. Wilson, Julian said, snapping the binder shut. They are assets of NB Holdings. They will be liquidated to pay for the wine you stole and the legal fees you generated. No! Darius screamed, lunging toward the front door. You can't take my watches! Deputy Jackson intercepted him effortlessly, shoving him back against the moving truck. The metal made a hollow thud against his back. Stand down, sir, or you will be leaving in handcuffs. I looked at Darius, pinned against the truck, stripping of his arrogance. You wanted the lifestyle of a rich man, Darius. Now you are paying the price. The eviction is immediate. You leave with the clothes on your back. Brittany began to sob, a loud, ugly sound. This isn't fair. You planned this. You set us up. I put my sunglasses back on. I didn't set you up, Brittany. I just let you be yourselves. And as it turns out, you are your own worst enemies. Sheriff, please remove the trespassers. I have a contractor coming at noon to change the locks. Again, Deputy Jackson did not ask twice. He signaled to his partner, a burly officer with a stone face, and they moved in. Darius tried to puff out his chest to play the role of the outraged homeowner one last time, but the facade crumbled the moment the handcuffs clicked onto his wrists. He wasn't being arrested for the fraud yet, but for resisting a court order and assaulting a mover. He slumped the fight, leaving his body, as he was marched down the front steps he had walked up so arrogantly for years. Brittany was a different story. She latched onto the doorframe, her nails digging into the wood, screaming like a banshee. This is my house, you can't do this, I have rights. Deputy Jackson peeled her fingers off the molding one by one. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it before I add disturbing the peace to your list of problems. He escorted her forcibly down the driveway, her heels scraping against the concrete, leaving scuff marks that I would have the contractors buff out tomorrow. Then came the purge. The moving crew I had hired, a team of men who specialized in rapid foreclosures, began to empty the house. They did not use bubble wrap. They did not use care. They simply marched out with armfuls of Darius and Brittany's life and dumped it on the curb. I watched with a cold, serene satisfaction as a mover walked out with Brittany's vanity drawer. He tilted it, and a cascade of expensive makeup, perfumes, and jewelry spilled onto the wet grass near the gutter. It was a perfect mirror image of Tuesday afternoon. The only difference was that my clothes had been thrown into the mud by family. Theirs were being thrown onto the pavement by the law. Darius's collection of silk ties fluttered in the breeze before landing in a dirty puddle. Brittany's faux fur coats were tossed into a heap next to the fire hydrant. The neighbors who had once looked at the Wilsons with envy now stood on their porches, with phones raised recording every second of the downfall. Mrs. Higgins was zooming in on a pile of unpaid bills that had fluttered out of a box, broadcasting the financial ruin to the entire homeowners association. Brittany stood on the sidewalk, shivering despite the heat, watching her curated image disintegrate. She looked at me, her eyes red and hateful. "Where are we supposed to go? Nia, you took our money. You took our kids. Now you take the roof." I walked to the edge of the property line, careful not to step on her discarded wardrobe. I remember the receptionist at the St. Regis mentioned a Motel 6 down on the highway. I said, my voice smooth and level. "They have vacancies. And since you don't have a credit card anymore, I suggest you start walking. It is a long hike." Darius looked at me from the back of the patrol car where they had placed him to cool off. "Naya, please," he mouthed through the glass. I turned my back on them. The house was empty. The cancer had been cut out. I signaled the lead mover, changed the locks I ordered, and put up the no trespassing sign. I don't want any stray animals wandering back in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a victory text. It was a call from Northside Hospital. The caller ID read, "Emergency room admission." I answered, my heart skipping a beat, not for Darius or Brittany, but because I knew exactly who had just collapsed under the weight of the truth. It was time for the next appointment. While the movers were busy scrubbing the last traces of Brittany and Darius from my property, the final pillar of the Wilson family was crumbling across town. Louise stood at the intake desk of the Northside Hospital emergency room. She was clutching her chest, her breathing shallow, but her arrogance remained intact. She slapped her platinum insurance card onto the counter. "I need a private room immediately," Louise demanded, her voice trembling slightly. "I am experiencing palpitations. And I want Dr. Evans. He knows my chart." The triage nurse, a young woman named Sarah who looked exhausted, picked up the card. She typed the member ID into the system. She frowned, typed it again, and then looked up with a sympathetic but firm expression. "Mrs. Wilson, this policy is inactive," Sarah said. "The system shows it was terminated yesterday by the primary subscriber. Do you have another form of payment? The consultation fee and EKG will be $2,000 up front without coverage." Louise gripped the edge of the counter. "Terminated. That is impossible. My son manages this account. He is a wealthy developer. Just bill him." "We cannot do that, ma'am," Sarah replied. "We need a valid credit card on file." Louise fumbled in her Chanel bag. She pulled out the gold card Marcus had given her for emergencies. She handed it over with a shaking hand. "This will work. It has a $50,000 limit." Sarah swiped the card. The terminal beeped a harsh, dissonant tone. "Declined." Louise felt the room tilt. Her vision blurred at the edges. "No," she gasped. "Try it again." "It is declined," ma'am, Sarah said, handing the card back. "Mrs. Wilson, you look very pale. We need to get your vitals, but I cannot admit you without payment or a guarantor. Is there someone we can call?" "Call Marcus?" Louise wheezed. Her knees buckled. The pain in her chest shifted from a dull ache to a crushing weight, as if an elephant were sitting on her ribs. the stress of the last 48 hours, the fear, the humiliation, the realization that her golden life was a lie finally caught up with her heart. She grabbed at her collar. I can't breathe. She collapsed onto the linoleum floor. Her expensive handbag spilled open, scattering unpaid bills and empty pill bottles across the sterile tiles. Code blue in the lobby. Sarah shouted, vaulting over the desk. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Paramedics lifted Louise onto a gurney. Scissors cut through her cashmere sweater. Monitors were attached, filling the air with urgent, rhythmic beeping. As they wheeled her into Trauma Room 4, a nurse grabbed Louise's phone to find an emergency contact. She dialed Marcus. Straight to voicemail. She dialed Darius. Voicemail. She dialed Brittany. Voicemail. There was only one other number listed in the favorites. It was labeled Nia, in case of emergency. I was standing in the empty living room of the Tuxedo Road house supervising the contractor who was changing the locks when my phone rang. I saw the caller ID, Northside Hospital admission. I knew this call was coming. I knew Louise's health was fragile, and I knew that without my financial shield, the stress would break her. I slid my finger across the screen to answer. "This is Nia Brooks." "Mrs. Brooks," a frantic voice said on the other end. "This is Charge Nurse Betty at Northside. We have your mother-in-law, Louise Wilson. She has collapsed in the lobby, suspected myocardial infarction. She is stable but critical. We need authorization for an angiogram, but her insurance is down and we cannot reach her son." I walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn where Brittany had thrown my clothes just days ago. I held the power of life and death in my hand. I could hang up. I could let the system swallow her whole. "Is she conscious?" I asked calmly. "She is sedated, but waking up," the nurse replied. "She keeps asking for Marcus." "But Mrs. Brooks, without a deposit or insurance verification, we can only provide stabilization, not the procedure." I checked my watch. "I am 20 minutes away," I said. "Do not discharge her. Do not transfer her to the county facility. I am coming, and I am bringing the checkbook." I hung up and turned to the contractor. "Lock it up. I have one last debt to collect." Here's the continuation of the script, segment 29, maintaining the tone pacing and word count requirements. I walked through the automatic doors of the Northside Hospital Emergency Department, the heels of my white Louboutins clicking rhythmically against the sterile linoleum. The air smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. I didn't stop at the reception desk. I already knew where she was. Trauma Room 4, the same room they put VIP patients in when they assume the bill will be paid in full. I pushed open the heavy door. Louise was lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to a constellation of monitors. Her skin was the color of old parchment, but her eyes, sharp and judgmental, snapped open the moment I entered. She wasn't dead. In fact, seeing me seemed to revive her entitlement faster than the IV drip. "About time," Louise wheezed, pulling herself up against the pillows. She pointed a trembling finger at the clock on the wall. "Do you know how long I have been waiting?" The nurse said they cannot do the angiogram until the deposit clears. I could have died, Nia. I stood at the foot of the bed, clutching my Hermes Birkin, the real one, not the knockoff Brittany owned. I didn't rush to her side. I didn't hold her hand. I just watched her. "Hello, Louise," I said, my voice cool and detached. "I came as fast as traffic allowed." Louise scoffed, adjusting her hospital gown as if it were a couture dress. "Well, don't just stand there gawking. Go to the billing department and fix this. Marcus must be frantic trying to reach me. I am sure the international lines are down. That is the only reason my card declined." She paused, looking me up and down with that familiar sneer. "And look at you, wearing white to a hospital. You really have no sense of occasion. Marcus always said you tried too hard to look expensive but never quite pulled it off. He needs a woman with natural class, like Jackie." I felt a dark laugh bubbling in my chest, but I swallowed it. She was lying in a bed I was about to pay for, insulting me with the name of the woman who was currently stealing her son's last dime. The delusion was almost impressive. You should be grateful I called you. Louise continued, her voice gaining strength. I told the nurse you were just the emergency contact, not family. But since Marcus is unreachable, I suppose you will have to do. Consider this your chance to redeem yourself, Nia. If you handle this quietly and pay the bill, I might convince Marcus not to divorce you completely. Maybe he will keep you around as an assistant. You are good at paperwork, aren't you? She waved her hand dismissively toward the door. Go on now, put it on the black card. The one Marcus lets you carry for groceries, and make sure they upgrade me to the executive suite. This room smells like disinfectant. I walked slowly to the side of the bed. I placed my bag on the tray table. I didn't pull out a credit card. I pulled out a thick bound document. You think Marcus pays for your life, Louise? I said softly, leaning in close. You think he is the one who keeps the lights on in your condo? You think he is the one who leases your Lexus? Louise narrowed her eyes. Of course he does. He is a king. He takes care of his mother. I opened the document to the first page. It wasn't a medical form. It was a forensic accounting of the Marcus Brooks real estate empire. Marcus hasn't made a profit in 5 years, Louise, I said, pointing to the red ink. He hasn't paid a single bill since 2019. I did. Louise froze. What are you talking about? Every check you received, every spa day, every car payment. It all came from my personal trust, I whispered. You have been living on my charity while spitting in my face. And today, the charity stops. Here is the continuation of the script, specifically, Segment 30, following your requirements. Segment 30. The only sound in the hospital room was the rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor, a mechanical metronome counting down the seconds until Louise's world imploded. I stood at the foot of her bed, the heavy binder of financial records open in my hands. Louise looked at the pages, squinting, trying to make the numbers lie, but math is the only language that never deceives. You are confused, Louise whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus gave me those checks. I saw him sign them. He sat at my kitchen table every month and wrote them out with that gold pen I gave him. He signed them, yes, I said, flipping to the page showing the scanned images of the cashed checks. But look at the routing number, Louise. Look at the account name in the top left corner. It does not say M&J Holdings. It does not say Marcus Brooks. It says the Nia Brooks Revocable Trust. Louise stared at the image. The blood drained from her face, making her look even more like a corpse than she had when she arrived. I transferred the money to a joint checking account solely so he could write those checks to you. I continued, my voice devoid of pity. He begged me, Louise. He cried in our bedroom. He said he felt like a failure because he couldn't afford your lifestyle. He said, Nia, please, just let me hand her the check. Let me be the man she thinks I am. So I let him. I let him play the king with my treasury. I turned the page again. That Chanel bag you are so worried about. The one the nurse put on the chair. Here is the credit card statement from Neiman Marcus. Paid in full by Nia Brooks. Your arthritis medication paid by Nia Brooks. The lease on your Lexus, Nia Brooks. Louise began to shake. No, he told me his investments were paying off. He told me he was closing deals in Dubai. There were no deals in Dubai, I said, leaning in closer. There were no deals in London. There was only me working 60-hour weeks at the firm, auditing massive corporations, and coming home to sign checks so your son could pretend he wasn't unemployed. I supported a grown man and his ungrateful mother for 5 years. And in return, you called me boring. You told me I wasn't enough. Louise looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a woman realizing her idol was made of clay. Why, she croaked. Why would you do that? Because I loved him, I said, closing the binder with a sharp snap. And I wanted you to love me. I thought if I kept the family afloat, if I kept the secrets, eventually you would respect me. But I was wrong. You don't respect the hand that feeds you, Louise. You bite it. I picked up the final document from the table. But here's the part that will really hurt. Marcus didn't just use my money to support you. When he decided to run away with Jackie, he realized my accounts were getting harder to access. So he turned to his backup plan. I held up the paper. It was a loan application. 2 weeks ago, a reverse mortgage was taken out on your condo, I said. $100,000, the maximum equity available. Louise gasped, clutching her chest. My condo, no. I own it outright. The deed is in my safe. Marcus forged your signature, I said brutally. He cashed out your home to pay for his first-class tickets and that villa in Spain. He literally sold the roof over your head to impress his mistress. The monitor began to beep faster. He wouldn't, Louise sobbed. He is my son. He is a thief, Louise, I said, picking up my purse. And now, because I bought the distressed debt package from the bank this morning to prevent them from foreclosing on you immediately, I am the one holding the deed. Marcus sold you out. I own your home now. I turned to walk away. Rest up. You have a lot of packing to do when you get discharged. I walked over to the small bedside table and picked up the hospital billing invoice the nurse had left. It was a preliminary estimate for the cardiac catheterization and a 2-night stay in the cardiac wing. $15,000. It was a staggering amount for most people. For Louise, in her current financial state, it might as well have been $15 million. I pulled a checkbook from my purse. Not the joint account checkbook I used to share with Marcus. This was my personal ledger bound in navy blue leather embossed with the gold letters of my private trust. I uncapped my pen and wrote the date. I filled in the amount. I signed my name with a steady, decisive hand. Louise watched me from the bed, her breathing shallow. She looked at the check as if it were a life raft in the middle of the ocean. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I knew you wouldn't let me die. I knew you still cared. I tore the check from the book with a sharp ripping sound. I didn't hand it to her. I placed it on the tray table just out of her reach. Do not mistake this for care, Louise, I said, my voice cold and clinical. This is not an act of love. This is a severance package. I am paying this bill for one reason only. I want you to be alive to see what happens next. I want you to be healthy enough to witness the full extent of your son's failure. Louise flinched. Nia, please. We can start over. I will treat you better. I promise. It is too late for promises, I said, putting the pen away. This check is the last penny you will ever receive from me. There will be no more spa treatments, no more car payments, no more bailouts. I leaned in my hands, resting on the bed rail. As for your condo, since I now hold the title, you will be receiving a call from my property management company on Monday. They will assess the fair market rent. You can either pay it using your Social Security check, or you can vacate the premises. I will treat you exactly like you treated me, like a business transaction. You can't be serious, Louise gasped. You would charge your own mother-in-law rent. Ex-mother-in-law, I corrected. And yes, I would, because unlike you, I understand the value of $1. You spent 5 years thinking you were royalty. Now you are going to learn what it is like to be a commoner. I picked up my purse and turned toward the door. Louise reached out a trembling hand to grab my sleeve. Nia, wait. Don't leave me here alone. Marcus isn't answering. Who will drive me home? I pulled my arm away, brushing off her touch as if it were dust. That sounds like a personal problem, Louise. I suggest you call an Uber. Oh, wait. You don't have a credit card. Maybe you can take the bus. It stops right in front of the hospital. Nia, she screamed, the monitor beeping frantically in response to her rising panic. I didn't look back. I walked out of room 304 and let the heavy door swing shut, cutting off her wails. I walked to the nurse's station and handed the check to the charge nurse. Here, I said, this covers the procedure. If she orders anything else, extra food, private nurses, premium channels, bill her directly. I am no longer the guarantor. The nurse nodded, looking at the check with wide eyes. Understood, Mrs. Brooks. Is there anything else? Yes, I said, adjusting my sunglasses. Remove my number from her emergency contact list. If her heart stops again, call her son. I have a flight to catch. I walked out of the hospital into the humid Atlanta afternoon. The air felt heavy, but my spirit felt weightless. The anchors were cut. The house was reclaimed. The leech was removed. There was only one thing left to do. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app. Destination Barcelona. It was time to pay my husband a visit. The glass doors of Buckhead Premier Realty slid open, and Brittany Wilson stepped into the air-conditioned lobby. She was wearing a dress she had retrieved from the pile on the curb, hastily steamed in the bathroom of the Motel 6, where she and Darius had spent the last 2 nights. She adjusted her sunglasses, trying to hide the puffiness around her eyes. In her mind, she could still fix this. She just needed to close the deal on the Harrison estate. One big commission check would get them into a rental apartment and buy her some time to destroy Nia. She walked past the reception desk, flashing her signature smile. "Good morning, Jessica," she chirped. "Any messages for me?" Jessica, the receptionist who usually complimented Brittany's shoes, did not smile back. She looked down at her phone, her face flushing pink. "Actually, Mrs. Wilson, Mrs. Kensington wants to see you in her office, immediately." Brittany felt a knot form in her stomach. She walked down the hallway, noticing the silence. The other agents' women she had lunched with, gossiped with, and judged others with stopped talking as she passed. They whispered behind their hands. She heard the words mugshot and squatter. She pushed open the door to the broker's office. Eleanor Kensington sat behind her glass desk, staring at a tablet. She did not offer Brittany a seat. "Close the door," Eleanor said, her voice ice cold. Brittany closed it, forcing a laugh. "Eleanor, you look so serious. If this is about the sales figures, I swear I have a buyer for the." Eleanor turned the tablet around. On the screen was the homepage of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The headline read, "Local Socialites Arrested in Tuxedo Park Eviction Brawl." Below it was a video. The video, Mrs. Higgins had live-streamed. It showed Brittany screaming profanities at the sheriff being dragged down the driveway and Darius trying to punch a mover. It currently had 50,000 views. "What is this?" Brittany Eleanor asked. Brittany's hands began to shake. "It is a misunderstanding, Eleanor. My sister-in-law is mentally unstable. She set us up. I am the victim here." Eleanor stood up. "You are wearing the same dress in the video that you are wearing right now, and according to the police report that was just faxed to me, you are facing charges for domestic disturbance, resisting arrest, and child neglect." "That is slander," Brittany screamed. "It is public record," Eleanor shouted back, slamming her hand on the desk. "And worse, we ran a standard background check for your license renewal this morning. You have a civil judgment against you for $50,000 in credit card debt. Your credit score has dropped below 500. "So what?" Brittany cried. "That is personal. In real estate, nothing is personal," Eleanor snapped. "We handle multi-million-dollar transactions. Our clients trust us with their life savings. Do you think anyone is going to buy a house from a woman who just got evicted for squatting?" "You are a liability, Brittany. You are a walking PR disaster." Eleanor slid a box of tissues across the desk. "You are fired. Effective immediately. Your license sponsorship is revoked. Surrender your badge and key fob." "But I have nowhere to go," Brittany whispered, the reality crashing down on her. "We lost the house. Darius lost his job. If you fire me, we are on the street." "That is not my problem," Eleanor said, returning to her work. "Security will escort you out. And Brittany, do not use me as a reference." Brittany walked out of the office, flanked by 2 security guards. The agents she used to look down on watched her leave. She was not the queen bee anymore. She was just another cautionary tale in a town that forgave everything except being broke. The fluorescent lights of the parking garage buzzed with a headache-inducing hum, casting long, sickly shadows across the concrete. Darius Wilson adjusted the collar of his polyester uniform. It was 2 sizes too small, pinching his neck, and the patch on the chest read, Secure Guard Night Watch. A week ago, at 2 a.m., he would have been closing the books at the Capitol Grill, sipping a glass of vintage Cabernet he hadn't paid for, laughing with the bartenders about which waitress he might flirt with. Now he was standing in a drafty booth, earning $12 an hour, to make sure no one broke into cars that were nicer than anything he would ever drive again. He touched the bruise on his cheek where the mover had shoved him. His back screamed in protest. The mattress at the Motel 6 was lumpy and stained, and Brittany had spent the entire night crying and accusing him of ruining her life. He looked at his reflection in the darkened window of a parked BMW. He didn't see the swaggering manager anymore. He saw a tired, broken man with a criminal record and a negative bank balance. His phone buzzed on the metal counter. He flinched, expecting another debt collector or a lawyer. But it wasn't. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Congratulations to Nia Brooks on her promotion to senior partner. He stared at the screen. She was winning. She was ascending while he was spiraling into the gutter. Desperation clawed at his throat. He realized with a sickening clarity that Nia was the only person who had the power to stop the bleeding. She had bought the debt. She controlled the lawsuit. If she wanted to, she could drop the charges. She could give them a grace period. He opened his messages. His thumb hovered over her name. He swallowed his pride, a bitter pill that tasted like bile. Nia. He typed, his fingers trembling. I am sorry. I didn't know about the fraud. Marcus lied to all of us. I was just trying to protect my family. Please don't let me lose everything. Brittany is falling apart. I am working night shifts just to buy food. Have mercy. I can help you testify against Marcus. Just please call me. He hit send. He watched the blue bubble appear. He held his breath, staring at the screen, praying for the 3 dancing dots that would indicate she was typing back. He waited 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5. Miles away in the Delta Sky Club at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, I sat in a quiet corner sipping sparkling water with a slice of lime. My phone lit up on the marble table. I glanced at the message preview. It was Darius. He was begging. He was bargaining. He was offering to sell out his own brother to save his own skin. It was pathetic. But it was also exactly what I expected. Parasites always look for a new host when the old one dries up. I picked up the phone. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel a desire to gloat. I felt absolutely nothing. Darius was no longer an adversary. He was irrelevant. I didn't need his testimony. I had the bank records. I didn't need his apology. I had my dignity. I didn't type a reply. I didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing I had read it. I tapped the information icon next to his name. I scrolled down to the bottom of the screen. The red text glared at me. Block this caller. I pressed it without hesitation. A pop-up asked me to confirm. Block contact. I tapped yes. Darius's name vanished from my feed, deleted from my digital existence. I set the phone back down and picked up my passport. The flight to Barcelona was boarding in 20 minutes. I had a husband to catch and I didn't have time for the help. The taxi driver refused to drive into the complex. He stopped at the curb of the Pines Apartments, popped the trunk, and demanded cash up front before unlocking the doors. Darius handed over his last $20 bill, a tip from a sympathetic truck driver at the impound lot where he had spent the morning, begging for his car back. The driver sped off, leaving a cloud of exhaust fumes that mingled with the scent of damp garbage radiating from the overflowing dumpster nearby. Louise stood on the cracked sidewalk, clutching her plastic bag of hospital discharge papers like a lifeline. She was wearing the same clothes she had collapsed in now, wrinkled and smelling of hospital antiseptic. She looked up at the building. It was a looming block of gray concrete stained with rust streaks and peeling paint. Security bars covered every window on the ground floor. A group of teenagers sat on the hood of a rusted sedan watching them with predatory amusement. I cannot go in there, Louise whispered, her voice trembling. Darius, call the concierge. Tell them there has been a mistake. This is not the corporate housing. Darius picked up the two heavy black trash bags that contained everything they had managed to salvage. There is no concierge, mama, he said, his voice flat and dead. This is Section 8 emergency placement. It is all we qualified for with an eviction on our record. He led them toward the entrance. The glass on the front door was shattered and replaced with plywood. The buzzer system had been ripped out of the wall, leaving exposed wires dangling like severed veins. Inside, the hallway smelled of stale cigarette smoke, boiled cabbage, and urine. Fourth floor, Darius muttered, looking at the key in his hand. Is there an elevator? Louise asked, pressing a hand to her chest. My heart. Darius. The doctor said no exertion. Out of order, Darius said, pointing to the metal doors that had a condemnation notice taped to them. We have to walk. The climb was a slow, agonizing procession. Louise had to stop on every landing, gasping for air, her face turning gray in the dim fluorescent light. Brittany trailed behind them, silent and ghost-like. She was dragging her feet, her eyes fixed on nothing. She had not spoken since they left the real estate office. She was in withdrawal, her body shaking, her mind unable to process that she had gone from a Buckhead mansion to a stairwell in the slums in less than 48 hours. When Darius finally unlocked the door to apartment 4B, the heat hit them like a physical blow. The air conditioning unit in the window was silent and broken. The apartment was a single room with a kitchenette and a small bedroom off to the side. The carpet was a shade of brown that suggested decades of spills. The walls were thin. They could hear the neighbors arguing on one side and a baby crying on the other. Brittany walked into the center of the room. She looked at the sagging sofa with the cigarette burn on the armrest. She looked at the cockroach skittering across the counter. Where do the twins sleep? She asked, her voice small and childlike. Darius dropped the bags on the floor. The sound was heavy and final. The twins aren't here, Brittany. Nia has them. Remember, you are unfit. Brittany collapsed onto the dirty carpet. She pulled her knees to her chest and began to rock back and forth. It smells bad here, she whimpered. I want to go home. Shut up, Louise snapped, sitting gingerly on the edge of the sofa, as if it were contaminated. Stop whining. My head is splitting. Darius, get me some water. Darius walked to the sink. He turned the handle. Brown water sputtered out, coughing and groaning before settling into a rusty stream. He stared at it. He realized he was the head of the household now. A household with no money, a sick mother, an addict wife, and a minimum-wage job guarding cars he used to drive. He walked to the window and looked out through the grime. In the distance, the glass skyscrapers of downtown Atlanta glittered like diamonds. He could see the faint outline of the St. Regis Hotel. He knew Nia was probably there or on a plane drinking champagne. We are in hell, Darius whispered to the glass. No, Louise said, swatting a fly away from her face. We are just in the waiting room. Marcus will fix this. He is closing a deal in Spain. He will send a car for us tomorrow. Darius looked at his mother, lost in her delusion. He didn't have the heart to tell her that the only thing Marcus was closing right now was his own coffin. The Mediterranean sun, which had felt like a warm embrace just yesterday, now beat down on Marcus like a spotlight in an interrogation room. He stood at the polished mahogany reception desk of the Grand Hotel Central in Barcelona, sweat trickling down the back of his expensive linen shirt. Across from him, the hotel manager, Señor Garcia, tapped a manicured finger on a leather-bound folio containing a bill that was thick enough to be a novel. 22,000 euros, Monsieur Brooks, Garcia said, his voice smooth but edged with steel. This includes the penthouse suite, the private chef services, the 3 bottles of vintage Dom Perignon you ordered to the pool, and the incident with the antique vase your guest broke during the party last night. Marcus forced a laugh, wiping his clammy palms on his trousers. Right, the vase. Look, Garcia, I told you. There is a standard security hold on my American accounts. It happens all the time with high-net-worth individuals traveling abroad. It is for my protection. I just need to get my bank on the line to clear the flag. He pulled out his wallet, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He produced a platinum visa, the fourth card he had tried in the last 10 minutes. Run this one. It is a backup, but it has a $50,000 limit. It will go through. Garcia sighed, a sound of profound patience wearing thin. He took the card and inserted it into the chip reader. Marcus held his breath, staring at the small digital screen, praying to a god he hadn't spoken to in years. Beep, beep, beep. The screen flashed a harsh, unforgiving red. Declined. Contact issuer. Fraud alert. Garcia handed the card back with the tips of his fingers as if it were soiled. Declined, again, just like the Amex, just like the MasterCard, just like the wire transfer you attempted this morning. There has to be a mistake, Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the marble counter, causing a passing couple to stare in alarm. I am Marcus Brooks. I have millions in assets. My wife is a senior partner at a major financial firm in Atlanta. This is a glitch. Your wife? Garcia raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting from annoyance to cold amusement. Is that the same wife who called our finance department an hour ago to confirm that all corporate guarantees for your stay have been revoked due to ongoing criminal investigations? Marcus froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale. She called you. She did, Garcia said, signaling to two large security guards standing near the elevators. She faxed over a copy of the court order freezing your assets, and she informed us that the credit card originally used to book the room was reported stolen, which means, Monsieur Brooks, that for the last 3 days you have been stealing our services. The guards stepped forward, crossing their arms over their chests. They looked like statues carved from granite. Marcus looked at them, then back at the bill. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. He wasn't just broke. He was trapped in a foreign country, in a hotel he couldn't afford, with a wife who was methodically dismantling his life from 4,000 miles away. I can fix this, Marcus stammered, backing away until his back hit the pillar. I have cash. In the room. My girlfriend Jackie, she has cash. Let me just go up and get it. I will pay you right now. You have 10 minutes, Garcia said, checking his Rolex. If the bill is not settled in full by noon, I am calling the Mossos d'Esquadra. Theft of services over 400 euros is a criminal offense in Spain, monsieur. For 22,000, you will be in a holding cell before lunch. And I assure you, Spanish prisons are not as comfortable as our suites. 10 minutes, Marcus whispered. He spun around and sprinted toward the elevators, ignoring the stares of the guests. He needed Jackie. He needed her stash. He needed a miracle. But as the elevator doors closed, trapping him in the mirrored box, he saw his own reflection. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a fugitive, running out of road. The air in the penthouse suite of the Grand Hotel Central was thick with the scent of stale scotch and suffocating panic. Marcus had spent the last 3 hours pacing the marble floors, screaming into his phone at automated bank assistants while Jackie sat on the velvet chaise lounge filing her nails. She watched him with the cold, predatory gaze of a woman who realizes her investment has just crashed. Marcus finally collapsed onto the bed, exhausted, and drunk on the minibar liquor he hoped would numb the reality of his situation. It is just a misunderstanding, babe, he slurred, closing his eyes. The wire hits tomorrow. We will move to a different hotel, one that respects my status. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into a heavy, snoring rhythm. Jackie stood up. She did not go to comfort him. She walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. She looked at her reflection. She was 24 years old. She was beautiful. And she was not going to jail for a man who could not even afford a cheese plate. She walked back into the bedroom, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet. She approached the nightstand where Marcus had carelessly tossed his belongings in a fit of rage earlier. There it was, the only liquid asset left in the room, the Rolex Day-Date 40, solid 18-karat yellow gold with a champagne dial. Nia had bought it for him as a 5th anniversary gift. He loved that watch more than he loved his family. Jackie picked it up. It was heavy, cool to the touch. She slipped it into her purse without a second of hesitation. Next, she picked up his alligator skin wallet. She opened it. The credit cards were useless plastic shards now, but tucked in the back fold were €800 in cash. It was the last of the travel money. She took it all. She even took the loose change from the bedside table. She moved to the closet and began to pack. She did not rush. She folded her silk dresses and placed her new Hermès bag into her suitcase with reverence. She left Marcus's clothes scattered on the floor. She left his empty wallet open on his chest, a final insult. She pulled out her phone and opened the encrypted messaging app. She typed a single message to Dmitry, the Russian shipping magnate she had been flirting with at the marina. He is a fraud. I am done. Pick me up at the corner of Via Laietana in 10 minutes. I am ready to see the French Riviera. She zipped up her suitcase. She walked to the door, then paused. She looked back at Marcus sleeping with his mouth open, drool pooling on the expensive pillowcase. He looked pathetic. He looked small. You promised me the world, Marcus, she whispered into the darkness. But you couldn't even pay for the room service. She opened the heavy door and slipped out into the hallway. The latch clicked shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. She didn't look back. She took the elevator down to the lobby, breezed past the sleeping night porter, and walked out into the Barcelona night. The warm Spanish wind hit her face, smelling of the sea and freedom. A black Mercedes Maybach was already idling at the corner, waiting to whisk her away to a new life, leaving Marcus to wake up to a nightmare of his own making. The morning sun filtered through the grand glass doors of the hotel lobby, casting long shadows across the polished marble. It was 8 in the morning, the time when business travelers were checking out and tourists were gathering for excursions. Marcus Brooks stepped out of the elevator wearing the wrinkled linen suit he had passed out in. He carried no luggage. He had left everything in the room, hoping that looking unencumbered would make him invisible. He kept his head down, wearing sunglasses to hide his bloodshot eyes, and walked briskly toward the revolving doors. He was 10 feet away from freedom, 10 feet away from disappearing into the Gothic quarter. Mr. Brooks. The voice was not loud, but it stopped him dead in his tracks. It was Senor Garcia, the manager. Marcus froze. He considered running. He considered bolting for the door, but 2 uniformed officers of the Mossos d'Esquadra stepped out from behind a pillar blocking the exit. Their hands rested casually on their belts. They did not look like they were in the mood for a chase. Marcus turned around slowly. Garcia stood by the reception desk, holding the folio of unpaid bills like a verdict. Going somewhere, Monsieur Brooks, Garcia asked pleasantly. Perhaps to the bank you claimed would open at 9. I was just going for a walk, Marcus stammered, his voice cracking. To clear my head. I need fresh air before I settle the account. Garcia shook his head. I do not think so. The authorities would like to have a word with you first. One of the officers stepped forward. He was a large man with a thick beard and eyes that had seen enough entitled tourists to last a lifetime. Marcus Brooks, he asked in heavily accented English. Yes, that is me, Marcus said, straightening his spine, trying to summon the ghost of his former arrogance. And I am an American citizen. You cannot detain me. I have rights. I demand to speak to the consulate. The officer ignored him. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for fraud, theft of services, and potential flight to avoid prosecution. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. No, Marcus shouted, backing away. This is a mistake. My wife is sending the money. She is a partner at Sterling Financial. Call her. She will tell you. Your wife is the one who sent us the affidavit confirming you have no access to funds, the officer said, grabbing Marcus's wrist and twisting it behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked shut, with a sound that echoed through the silent lobby. Guests stopped to watch. A family from Ohio stared with wide eyes. A businessman took a photo. Marcus struggled, his face turning a blotchy red. Get your hands off me, he screamed. Do you know who I am? I am a property developer. I am an American. You cannot treat me like this. This is illegal. I will sue this hotel. I will sue all of you. Stop resisting, the officer barked, shoving Marcus toward the door. I am not resisting, Marcus yelled, tears of humiliation stinging his eyes. I am rich. I am an American citizen. You have to let me go. The officers dragged him through the revolving doors, his expensive Italian loafers scraping against the floor. They pushed him onto the hood of the patrol car in front of the valet stand. The doorman, the same one Marcus had tipped a single euro to yesterday, watched with a blank expression. Marcus looked around wildly. He saw the beautiful streets of Barcelona, the city he thought he would conquer. Now it was just a cage. He looked for Jackie. He hoped against hope that she would appear in a taxi with a bag of cash to save him. But the street was empty of mercy. Get in, the officer said, forcing Marcus's head down as he shoved him into the cramped back seat of the police car. I want my lawyer, Marcus sobbed, pressing his face against the glass as the car pulled away. I want my wife. But as the siren wailed, cutting through the morning traffic, Marcus realized with a sickening thud in his chest that his wife was the architect of this cage. And she wasn't coming to unlock it. She was coming to inspect it. The holding cell at the Mossos d'Esquadra station smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies, a stark contrast to the lavender-scented air of the hotel lobby Marcus had been dragged from just an hour ago. He sat on a cold metal bench, his linen suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. He kept tapping his foot, waiting for the door to open so he could charm his way out of this. In his mind, this was still just a billing dispute. A civil matter. He was an American businessman, and sooner or later they would realize they had made a terrible mistake. The heavy steel door finally buzzed and swung open, but it was not the local police captain coming to apologize. Two men walked in. One was the arresting officer. The other was wearing a dark gray suit that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. He carried a leather dossier and wore an earpiece. The air in the room instantly dropped 10 degrees. Marcus stood up, forcing a smile. Finally. Look, gentlemen, I can explain everything. The hotel bill is a misunderstanding. My bank in Atlanta is having technical difficulties. If you just let me make one phone call to my wife, she will wire the funds immediately. The man in the gray suit did not smile. He placed the dossier on the metal table and sat down. He did not look like a hotel manager. He looked like a shark. Sit down, Mr. Brooks, the man said. His accent was European, hard to place, but his English was flawless. I am Agent Russo with Interpol's Financial Crimes Division, and we are not here to discuss your room service bill. Marcus laughed nervously, sinking back onto the bench. Interpol? That seems a bit dramatic for a declined credit card, doesn't it? Agent Russo opened the file. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a printout of a wire transfer. $250,000. Origin, Atlanta, Georgia. Destination, a numbered account in Zurich. Do you recognize this transaction? Russo asked. Marcus looked at it. Yes. That is my money. I transferred my savings before I left the States. It is perfectly legal to move your own money. It is legal to move clean money. Mr. Brooks, Russo corrected, leaning forward. But this money was flagged by the United States Treasury Department and the FBI as a Tier 1 suspicious activity. The destination account in Zurich is not a savings account. It is a known shell account used by an Eastern European syndicate for laundering proceeds from narcotics trafficking. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. What? No. That is impossible. I just Googled an offshore bank. I didn't know who owned it. Ignorance is not a defense in federal court, Russo said coldly. But here is the problem, Marcus. The flag on this transfer was not automatic. It was manually inserted by the forensic auditor at the originating financial institution, a Ms. Nia Brooks. Marcus stopped breathing. Nia. According to her sworn affidavit, Russo continued tapping the paper, these funds were embezzled from a corporate account under your management and funneled into this laundering network. That upgrades your charges from petty theft to international wire fraud and money laundering. That is a lie, Marcus screamed, jumping up. She is setting me up. She is the auditor. She controls the codes. She made it look like dirty money. Sit down, the officer barked, putting a hand on his taser. Russo watched Marcus with bored indifference. Mr. Brooks, right now you are facing 20 years in a federal prison followed by deportation. Your assets are frozen. Your passport is flagged. You are currently a person of interest in a terrorism financing investigation. Marcus slumped against the wall, his head in his hands. He realized then that Nia hadn't just cut off his money. She had painted a target on his back and handed the gun to the most dangerous law enforcement agency in the world. So Russo said, closing the file. Unless you want to spend the next decade in a Spanish prison awaiting extradition, I suggest you start talking. Where is the rest of the money? And who is your contact in Zurich? I don't know, Marcus sobbed. I don't know anything. I just wanted to go on vacation. Russo stood up. Then you better pray your wife is feeling merciful, because right now she is the only one who can explain why you sent $250,000 to the mob. While Marcus sat on a steel bench in a holding cell that smelled of stale sweat and regret, I was cruising at 45,000 feet in the hushed cabin of a Gulfstream G650. This was not a vacation flight. This was a business trip. The jet belonged to Sterling Financial, and I was using it to transport the most valuable asset in the case. Me. I looked out the window as the coastline of Spain came into view, a rugged edge meeting the deep blue of the Mediterranean. I sipped sparkling water, my hand steady. Most women flying to see their husband in a foreign prison would be a mess of tears and anxiety. I felt only a cold, focused clarity. I was not going to Barcelona to save a marriage. I was going to close a file. The plane touched down at El Prat Airport, taxiing to the private terminal. A black Mercedes S-Class was waiting on the tarmac, engines idling. I stepped off the stairs, the warm Spanish air hitting my face. I adjusted my sunglasses. I was not wearing this grieving wife costume today. I was wearing a bespoke white Tom Ford suit tailored to within an inch of its life, sharp enough to cut glass. It was a suit that screamed power money and absolute authority. I slid into the back of the car, the Mossos d'Esquadra headquarters, I told the driver. And do not stop for traffic. The police station was a fortress of concrete and bureaucracy in the center of the city. I walked through the main doors, my heels clicking, a rhythm of impending doom on the tiled floor. The lobby was chaotic, filled with tourists reporting stolen wallets and locals arguing over fines. But the noise died down as I passed. People stopped to look. I did not look like someone who belonged there. I looked like someone who owned the place. I walked straight to the front desk. I am Nia Brooks, I stated, my voice cutting through the din. I am here to see Agent Russo of Interpol regarding the Marcus Brooks case. The desk sergeant looked up, bored. He opened his mouth to tell me to wait in line, then he saw the suit. He saw the briefcase. He saw the look in my eyes that said I could have his badge on my desk by lunchtime. He picked up the phone immediately. 2 minutes later, Agent Russo appeared. He was the man in the gray suit who had terrified Marcus. He looked at me, assessing the threat level. He did not see a victim. He saw a peer. Mrs. Brooks, he said, extending a hand. Ms. Brooks, I corrected, shaking his hand with a grip that matched his. And I am not here as the spouse. I am here as the court-appointed representative of the victimized entity, the Nia Brooks Revocable Trust. I have the additional evidence you requested regarding the money laundering structure. Russo smiled, a thin, shark-like expression. Excellent. Your husband has been resistant. He claims this is all a misunderstanding. He claims you will clear his name. I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. I am here to clear something, Agent Russo. I am here to clear the docket. Take me to him. I think it is time Marcus learned that the only thing I am signing today is his confession. We walked down the long, sterile corridor toward the interrogation rooms. I tightened my grip on my briefcase. Inside was the final nail in Marcus's coffin. He wanted a rich wife. He was about to find out exactly what it cost to cross one. The interrogation room at the Mossos d'Esquadra headquarters was a stark, windowless box painted a depressing shade of institutional gray. The air was stagnant, smelling of old coffee and despair. Marcus sat at the metal table, his hands cuffed to a steel ring bolt. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His linen suit was stained, his hair was a mess, and the arrogance that defined him was gone, replaced by a trembling, pathetic hope. When the heavy door opened and I walked in, flanked by Agent Russo, Marcus let out a sob of relief. He lunged forward, the chain snapping taut against the table leg. "Naya, baby." "Oh, thank God," he cried, tears streaming down his face. I told them my wife would come. Please get me out of here. These people are crazy. They think I am a terrorist. They took my shoelaces, Nia." I did not rush to him. I did not offer comfort. I pulled out the metal chair opposite him and sat down, placing my leather briefcase on the table with a deliberate thud. I signaled Russo to wait outside. I wanted this moment to be private. I wanted to see him squirm without an audience. "Hello, Marcus," I said, my voice calm and professional. "You look tired." "Tired I am in hell, Nia. That woman, Jackie, she ruined me." He babbled, his words tumbling over each other. "She put a spell on me. I swear I wasn't thinking straight. She drugged my drink at the airport. She stole my phone. I was trying to come home to you, but she forced me on that plane. I love you, Nia. You are the only one I ever loved." Jackie was a mistake. A momentary lapse in judgment. He was kneeling as much as the cuffs allowed, begging. It was a performance. A bad one. He truly believed he could charm his way out of a federal indictment. "She forced you to forge my signature on a reverse mortgage application?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "She forced you to wire $250,000 to a laundering account in Zurich. She forced you to leave your mother to die in a hospital lobby." Marcus froze. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Mom. What happened to Mom? She had a heart attack when the pharmacy declined your card," I said, watching his eyes. "But do not worry. I paid for her surgery, just like I paid for everything else in your pathetic life." Marcus grabbed for my hands. I pulled them away sharply. "See? You still care?" He pleaded, his eyes wide and desperate. "You paid for Mom. That means you still love us. Nia, listen. We can fix this. Just post the bail. It is 50,000 euros. I know you have the money. Get me out and I will make it up to you. I will sign whatever post-nup you want. I will go to counseling. We can go back to Atlanta and forget this ever happened." I stared at him. The delusion was breathtaking. He actually thought I was his safety net. He did not realize I was the spider. "I did not come here to bail you out, Marcus," I said, clicking the latches of my briefcase open. "I came here to clarify your legal standing. You seem to be under the impression that this is a marriage crisis. It is not. It is a federal indictment. And I am not here as your wife. I am here as the witness for the prosecution." "Witness for the prosecution," Marcus repeated, a nervous chuckle escaping his dry lips. "Babe, you are confused. The stress is getting to you. You are an administrative assistant. You file expense reports and order lunch for the partners. You don't testify in federal money laundering cases." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I reached into the breast pocket of my white Tom Ford blazer and pulled out a sleek black card case. I slid a heavy cream-colored business card across the metal table. It spun perfectly, stopping right under his nose. "Read it," I commanded. Marcus looked down. His lips moved silently as he read the embossed letters. "Nia Brooks, Senior Partner, Forensic Audit and Financial Crimes Division, Sterling Financial Group." He looked up, blinking rapidly, his brain struggling to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the title on the card. "I don't understand. You told me you worked in admin. You told me you made 40,000 a year. You coupon for groceries." "I lied," I said, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto his. "I have been a partner at Sterling for 3 years, Marcus. I make more in a month than you made in your entire real estate career, But I kept it a secret. Why? Because I knew you. I knew if you realized how much power I really had, you would have drained me dry years ago. I played the boring, penny-pinching wife because it was the only way to keep your greed in check. Marcus pulled against the handcuffs, the chains rattling. So, the money, the savings account, the honeypot. I corrected, a cold smile touching my lips. That $250,000 wasn't our life savings, Marcus. It was bait. I moved that money into the joint account 3 days before you left because I knew you were planning something. I knew you were talking to Jackie. I just needed you to commit the crime to trigger the federal statutes. I stood up and walked around the table, pacing behind him like a shark circling a swimmer. I designed the algorithm that flagged your transfer, I whispered into his ear. I set the trap. I authorized the freeze. And I sat in my office drinking coffee while I watched you walk right into it. You think you are here because of bad luck? You are here because I put you here. Marcus began to hyperventilate. The reality of his situation was finally crashing down. He wasn't dealing with a scorned woman. He was dealing with the architect of his destruction. You set me up, he gasped. That is entrapment. It is justice, I said, walking back to my chair. You stole the money. You forged the signatures. You abandoned your family. All I did was leave the door unlocked. You are the one who walked in and robbed the place. I opened my briefcase again and pulled out a tablet. And just so you know exactly how foolish you look, let's talk about your soulmate, Jackie. She tricked me, Marcus yelled, immediately pivoting to blame someone else. She is the mastermind. She forced me. Is she? I asked, tapping the screen. Because according to the surveillance photos I have here, Jackie isn't a mastermind. She is just another rat fleeing the ship, and she didn't leave empty-handed. I turned the tablet around to show him the photos from the private investigator. Recognize this? I asked, pointing to the image of Jackie boarding a yacht in the Barcelona harbor, and more importantly, recognize what is on her wrist. Marcus squinted at the screen. His eyes went wide. That's my Rolex, he whispered. My day date, the gold one. She stole your watch, Marcus, I said ruthlessly. And she stole the last 800 euros from your wallet while you were passed out drunk. She didn't leave you because of the police. She left you because you were broke. She stripped you clean and left you for the wolves. Marcus let out a guttural scream of rage, pulling at his chains until his wrists bled. I will kill her, that which I gave her everything. You won't kill anyone, I said calmly, because you are going to be in a cell for the next 10 years. Unless... I let the word hang in the air. Marcus stopped screaming. He looked at me with pathetic hope. Unless what? He begged. Nia, please. Anything. Unless you help me catch her, I said. And sign every single asset you have left over to me. The Mercedes Maybach glided toward the border crossing at La Jonquera, the gateway between Spain and France. Inside the climate-controlled cabin, Jackie felt the adrenaline finally beginning to fade, replaced by a smug sense of victory. She looked down at her wrist. Marcus's gold Rolex hung loosely on her arm, a heavy glittering trophy of her time in the trenches. In her purse sat the 800 euros she had lifted from his wallet. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to get to Paris. And from there, with Dimitri's help, she would disappear into the luxury life she deserved. She looked at Dimitri, who was driving with calm precision. He was handsome, silent, and radiated the kind of dangerous power that Marcus could only pretend to have. Baby, are we almost there? Jackie purred, reaching over to stroke his arm. I can't wait to get on the yacht. I need a massage. Spain was exhausting. Dimitri didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the road where flashing blue lights were visible in the distance. A roadblock. Almost, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth he had shown her at the marina. The car slowed down. Jackie frowned. She saw uniformed officers swarming the checkpoint. These weren't standard border guards. They were wearing tactical gear. Dimitri, why are we stopping? She asked, her voice pitching up. Just drive through. Tell them who you are. Tell them you are a diplomat or whatever. Dmitri pulled the car to a halt right in front of a spike strip. He put the car in park and turned off the engine. The doors unlocked with a soft click. I can't do that, Jackie, he said, turning to face her. Because I'm not a diplomat, and my name isn't Dmitri. Before Jackie could process the words, the passenger door was ripped open. Strong hands grabbed her arms and dragged her out of the plush leather seat. She screamed, kicking and scratching. Get off me! Do you know who I am? Dmitri, help me! She looked back at the car, expecting her Russian savior to be fighting for her. Instead, she saw him step out of the driver's side calmly. He walked over to the lead officer and shook his hand. He pulled a badge from his jacket pocket, not a Russian passport, but a private contractor identification linked to Interpol. Subject secured, he said to the police. The stolen property is on her person, the gold Rolex and the cash. Jackie froze, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. You're a cop. The man she knew as Dmitri walked over to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He held it up so she could see the screen. It was on a video call. Nia's face was on the display, looking cool and collected from the interrogation room in Barcelona. He isn't a cop, Jackie. Nia's voice came through the speaker, crisp and clear. He is a retrieval specialist. I hired him 3 months ago when I first noticed you liking Marcus's photos. I figured if Marcus was going to cheat, I should at least choose the other man. Jackie stared at the phone, her mouth hanging open. You set me up the yacht. The champagne. All paid for by the investigation budget, Nia said. I needed you to feel safe enough to steal. And you didn't disappoint. Grand larceny, flight to avoid prosecution, and thanks to Dmitri testifying that you plan to cross international lines with stolen goods, we can add trafficking to the list. The man smiled, a cold, professional expression. The watch, please, he said, unclasping the Rolex from her wrist. Evidence! Jackie screamed as the officers shoved her toward the police van. Nia, you are a monster. I will kill you. Get in line, Nia replied from the screen. My husband said the exact same thing 10 minutes ago. You two will have plenty to talk about in the holding cell. The man ended the call. The van doors slammed shut, plunging Jackie into darkness. She had tried to play the player, but she had forgotten the most important rule of the game. The house always wins, and Nia Brooks was the house. The holding cell was a cage of concrete and despair. But for Marcus, it was about to become a boxing ring. He was sitting on the floor, head in his hands, when the heavy steel door buzzed and swung open. He looked up expecting a lawyer. Instead, a disheveled figure was shoved inside by 2 guards. It was Jackie, but not the Jackie of Instagram. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks, her hair was a bird's nest, and her designer dress was torn at the shoulder. She stumbled, nearly tripping over her own heels. Marcus stood up, his eyes widening. Jackie. Jackie looked up. When she saw him, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She didn't cry. She didn't run into his arms. She lunged. You liar! She screamed, throwing her heavy Hermes bag at his head. It struck him on the shoulder, the buckle leaving a scratch. You told me you were a millionaire. You told me you owned the building. Marcus deflected the blow, his own rage igniting. You stole my watch. You left me in that hotel to rot. I gave you everything, and you robbed me while I was sleeping. I took what I was owed, Jackie shrieked, clawing at his face. I wasted 6 months on you. I could have been with a baller. Instead, I'm in a Spanish prison because you were too broke to pay for a salad. You made me do it, Marcus yelled back, grabbing her wrists. You're the one who wanted the first-class tickets. You're the one who said my mother didn't need the condo. I forged those papers for you. Don't you put this on me. Jackie spat in his face. I didn't tell you to be a fraud. I didn't tell you to launder money. You're not a king, Marcus. You're a joke. Even your wife knew it. She played you like a fiddle. The mention of Nia was the spark that blew the powder keg. Marcus shoved Jackie backward. She hit the wall and slid down, sobbing uncontrollably. I hate you. I hope they lock you up forever. The feeling is mutual, Marcus roared. Outside the cell, separated by a pane of one-way glass and heavy iron bars, I stood watching the performance. I held a steaming cup of cortado in my hand, the rich smell of Spanish coffee mixing with the satisfaction of total victory. Agent Russo stood beside me, arms crossed. Should we intervene? Russo asked, watching Marcus kick Jackie's discarded shoe across the cell. I took a slow sip of coffee. No, let them finish. They have a lot to discuss. Specifically, who is going to testify against whom to get a reduced sentence. By the time you interrogate them separately, they will be singing like canaries. I watched them for another minute. The two people who had conspired to destroy my life, who had laughed at my frugality and mocked my love, were now tearing each other apart in a cage I had locked. It was poetic. It was brutal. It was perfect. You know Agent Russo, I said, turning away from the glass. I used to worry that I wasn't exciting enough for Marcus. He always wanted drama. He always wanted passion. I glanced back one last time at the screaming match inside the cell. I think he finally got exactly what he wanted. I threw my empty coffee cup into the trash bin. I'm done here. Let's sign the papers. I have a plane to catch. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the muffled sounds of Marcus and Jackie tearing each other apart. The silence in Agent Russo's office was absolute, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. It didn't smell of desperation in here. It smelled of bureaucracy and cold, hard justice. Russo sat across from me at his metal desk. He slid a stack of paperwork toward me. On top was the refusal of bail form. He looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and professional respect. Are you sure about this, Ms. Brooks? Russo asked, his pen hovering over the document. The bail is set at 50,000 euros. Given your financial standing, that is a negligible amount. If you sign this, your husband will be transferred to Modello Prison immediately to await trial. The conditions there are significantly less accommodating than the holding cell. I picked up my Mont Blanc pen. I didn't look at Russo. I looked at the line that read Defendant Marcus Brooks. He is not my husband anymore, Agent Russo. I said, my voice smooth and sharp as a scalpel. He is a flight risk involved in international wire fraud. If I bail him out, he runs. I am not paying to buy risk. I am paying to eliminate it. I signed my name on the bottom line. The ink flowed dark and permanent. The sound of the nib scratching against the paper sounded like a lock clicking shut. Russo nodded, pulling the paper back. Understood. Remand is authorized. However, you should know that with the current evidence, mostly credit card fraud and theft of services, his lawyer will likely plea for a suspended sentence, 2 years deportation back to the U.S. and probation. I smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach my eyes. 2 years. That simply won't do. I placed my leather briefcase on the desk and unlatched it. I didn't just bring a tablet this time. I pulled out a thick, sealed yellow envelope. I thought you might say that, I said, sliding the envelope across the desk. So I brought you something else. Russo opened the seal. He pulled out the documents inside, scanning them with a frown. What is this? These are the original loan documents for a reverse mortgage taken out on a property in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, I explained. The property belongs to his mother, Louise Wilson. I had my firm's forensic handwriting team analyze the signature this morning. I pointed to the highlighted section. It is a forgery. Marcus signed his mother's name to liquidate her home equity. He used those funds to initiate the transfer to the Zurich laundering account. I leaned back in the chair, crossing my legs. This proves intent, Agent Russo. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was premeditated elder financial abuse combined with international laundering. Under Spanish and international law, the exploitation of a vulnerable family member to fund criminal activity is an aggravating factor. Russo looked up from the papers. His eyes widened slightly. This changes the classification entirely. This makes it a Tier 1 felony. The sentencing guidelines shift from 2 years to a minimum of 15. 15 years? I repeated, savoring the sound of it. No parole, no early release, just him and the consequences of his actions. Russo closed the file slowly. He looked at me as if I were a dangerous weapon he needed to register. You didn't just come here to ensure he was arrested, Ms. Brooks. You came here to bury him. I stood up, smoothing the front of my white suit. He buried my youth and my trust, First Agent Russo. I am just filling in the dirt. I turned and walked toward the door. The afternoon sun of Barcelona streamed through the hallway windows, bright and blinding. Marcus would not see that sun without bars across it for a very long time. I walked away, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. I didn't look back. The war was over, and I was the last one standing. The Atlanta skyline glittered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Financial. 6 months had passed since the sun set on Barcelona, but the light in my life had never been brighter. On the polished mahogany desk, sitting next to a crystal vase of fresh white orchids, lay the current issue of Forbes magazine. The cover did not feature a tech bro in a hoodie or a celebrity entrepreneur. It featured me. I was wearing the same white Tom Ford suit I had worn to the Spanish prison, my arms crossed, my expression unreadable. The headline was bold and embossed in gold: "The Silent Audit: How Nia Brooks Dismantled a Global Laundering Ring." I picked up the magazine, feeling the weight of the glossy paper. It was surreal. 6 months ago, I was being evicted from my own home, dismissed as a boring, penny-pinching housewife. Now I was the face of modern financial forensic intelligence. My assistant, a sharp young man named David, who actually did his job, knocked on the doorframe. "Ms. Brooks," David said reverently, "the journalist from the Wall Street Journal is on line 1 for the follow-up, and the FBI director sent a bottle of scotch. It is on the credenza." "Thank you, David," I said, putting the magazine down. "Tell the Journal I will email them my statement. I am done talking about the past." I walked over to the credenza and looked at the bottle. Attached was a note for the assist. "We closed the Zurich node this morning. 15 years confirmed for the mule." The mule. That was what they called Marcus now. Not a developer, not a king, just a mule. He was currently serving the first year of his 15-year sentence in a federal facility in Florida, having been extradited 3 months ago. Jackie was serving 5 years in a minimum security prison in France. They would be old and gray before they ever saw a luxury hotel again. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and walked back to the window. The article in Forbes had called me a hero of fiscal integrity. They detailed how I had tracked the $250,000 transfer, how I had mapped the shell companies, and how I had used my own husband as the bait to catch a syndicate that had evaded Interpol for a decade. But they didn't know the real story. They didn't know about the heartbreak. They didn't know about the nights I spent calculating the cost of my own dignity. They saw the victory, but they didn't see the war. I looked down at the street below. Somewhere in that city, Brittany was working double shifts at a diner to pay rent on a studio apartment. Louise was living in her condo, paying me market-rate rent every first of the month, terrified to be late even by a day. Darius was still working night security. They were all exactly where they belonged. And so was I. I checked my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, a gift I had bought for myself with my partner bonus. It was 5 p.m. I had a gala to attend tonight, the Women of the Year banquet. I grabbed my purse and walked out of the office. The bullpen went silent as I passed. It wasn't the silence of pity anymore. It was the silence of respect. I wasn't the invisible wife. I was the storm that cleared the air. I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close on my reflection. The boring girl was gone. The woman looking back at me was dangerous, wealthy, and finally completely free. The sound of the barcode scanner was a relentless, monotonous rhythm that defined Brittany Wilson's new existence. Beep, beep, beep. At checkout lane 4 of the Walmart Supercenter on the outskirts of Atlanta, Brittany stood hunched over the conveyor belt. She was wearing the oversized blue vest that hung loosely on her frame, a plastic name tag pinned crookedly to her chest reading B. Wilson. Gone were the silk blouses and the tailored linen trousers. Her manicured nails were now short and chipped, the expensive gel polish picked away by nervous fingers. Her feet, once adorned in designer heels, now ached inside a pair of cheap, discount bin sneakers. The customer in front of her was a woman with a sour expression and a cart full of cat food. She was tapping her foot impatiently. "I told you," the woman snapped, pointing a jagged fingernail at the digital screen. "That coupon is for 50 cents off. It didn't take it off. Are you incompetent?" "I apologize, ma'am," Brittany said, her voice raspy from a double shift. "The system says the coupon expired last week. I cannot manually override it." "Well, get a manager," the woman barked. "I am not paying full price because you don't know how to do your job." Brittany sighed, flipping the switch to turn on the flashing light above her register. As she waited for the floor manager to come and berate her over 50 cents, her eyes drifted aimlessly to the magazine rack positioned right next to the candy bars and gum. It was a kaleidoscope of celebrity gossip and recipes. And then she saw it. Front and center eye level was the latest issue of Forbes. The cover featured a woman standing against the Atlanta skyline, arms crossed, wearing a pristine white Tom Ford suit that screamed power. The headline was embossed in bold gold letters, N.I.A. Brooks, the silent auditor who topped the FBI's most wanted list. Brittany felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. She reached out and picked up the magazine. It was Nia, her sister-in-law, the woman she had mocked for being boring, the woman whose clothes she had thrown onto a wet lawn, the woman she had tried to evict. On the glossy page, Nia looked like a queen. Her eyes held a fierce intelligence and a serenity that Brittany had never bothered to notice before. She looked untouchable. Brittany looked down at her own reflection in the plexiglass divider. She saw a woman who looked 10 years older than her age. She saw the dark circles under her eyes. She saw the blue vest that marked her as minimum wage help. The memories crashed into her like a tidal wave. She remembered the tea party. She remembered calling the police. She remembered the smug satisfaction she felt when she thought she had won. She realized now, with a crushing weight in her chest, that she hadn't just lost a house. She had lost her humanity. She had bet everything on a fraudster husband and a cruel facade, and now she was paying the bill. A sob escaped her throat, a raw, ugly sound. She clutched the magazine to her chest, tears streaming down her face, ruining the little bit of makeup she had tried to apply that morning. She cried for the house on Tuxedo Road. She cried for her children in foster care. She cried for the utter, total humiliation of seeing the woman she despised rise to the stars while she rotted in the dirt. "Hey, Wilson." The sharp voice of the shift manager cut through her breakdown. He was standing there looking annoyed. "What are you doing?" "Reading on the clock," he shouted, gesturing to the line of angry customers. "Put that back and scan the cat food, we have a line forming. Do your job or punch out for good." Brittany jumped, flinching as if she had been struck. She hastily wiped her face with the rough fabric of her vest. She placed the magazine back on the rack, Nia's golden image staring back at her. "I'm sorry," Brittany whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry." She turned back to the register. She picked up a can of cat food. Beep. She picked up another. Beep. The sound echoed in her ears, a constant reminder that while Nia Brooks was making history, Brittany Wilson was just making change. Here is the continuation of the script. Segment 48, maintaining the exact flow, tone, and formatting requirements. Segment 48. The crystal chandeliers of the Capitol Grill hummed with a soft golden light, casting a warm glow over the mahogany walls and leather booths. 6 months ago, this dining room was Darius's personal kingdom, a place where he strutted with unearned arrogance and stole inventory to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Tonight, the air still smelled of expensive steak and old money, but the hierarchy had fundamentally shifted. I walked through the heavy double doors. I was not wearing the invisible gray suits of my past life. I wore a black velvet gown that hugged my frame off the shoulder, paired with the diamond drop earrings I had bought myself as a signing bonus. The new general manager, a man named Thomas, who ran the floor with military precision, bowed his head slightly as I approached. "Good evening, Ms. Brooks," Thomas said, his voice lowered in reverence. "Table 1 is ready. Mr. Sterling is already waiting." I smiled, a genuine expression that felt lighter than it had in years. "Thank you, Thomas." I walked into the main dining room. At the best table in the house, secluded in a private alcove, Julian was waiting. He wasn't wearing his courtroom armor tonight. He wore a crisp white shirt, with the top button undone, looking less like a shark and more like a man who finally had nothing left to prove. Julian was the human rights lawyer who had taken my case when no one else would touch the mess of international fraud. He had been my shield. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. His eyes swept over me, lingering with an appreciation that made my skin prickle. "Nia," he said, pulling out my chair. "You look incredible. The Forbes photographer really didn't do you justice." I sat down, smoothing the velvet over my legs. "Flattery will get you everywhere, Julian. I heard about the verdict in D.C. yesterday. A complete acquittal." Julian smiled, taking his seat. "Just doing the job. But we aren't talking about work tonight. Tonight is about celebrating the end of the probation period. You are officially free of the investigation." A sommelier appeared at the table, carrying a bottle of Screaming Eagle Cabernet Sauvignon. It was the exact vintage Darius had been fired for stealing. "Compliments of the house, Ms. Brooks," the sommelier said, pouring the dark ruby liquid into our glasses. "We are honored to have you dining with us." Julian raised an eyebrow as the sommelier retreated. "Impressive service. I remember when Darius ran this place. He would never have comped a $3,000 bottle unless it was for himself." I picked up the glass, swirling the wine. "Darius isn't a factor anymore, Julian. Actually, that is something I wanted to tell you. When I audited the restaurant's books 6 months ago to prove Darius's embezzlement, I noticed the underlying financials were strong. The owner was desperate to sell because of the scandal." I took a sip, looking over the rim of the glass at Julian. "So I bought the dip," I said calmly. "I acquired a 20% stake in the restaurant group last week. This isn't just a dinner reservation, Julian. It is an owner's inspection." Julian stared at me for a beat, stunning silence hanging between us. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound that drew eyes from the nearby tables. "You are terrifying," he said, shaking his head in admiration. "You didn't just get him fired. You took his throne and turned it into a date night." "It is called distressed asset management," I replied, a playful smirk touching my lips. Julian reached across the table, covering my hand with his. His palm was warm, his grip steady. "So, Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate register, "now that you have conquered the business world, acquired the real estate, and jailed the villains, is there any room in your portfolio for a pro bono lawyer who thinks you are the most fascinating woman he has ever met?" I looked at him. I saw the kindness in his eyes, the strength that didn't require someone else's weakness to exist. I turned my hand over, lacing my fingers through his. "I think I can make room," I whispered. "But be warned, Julian. I have very strict internal controls." Julian squeezed my hand. "I wouldn't have it any other way." We clinked our glasses. The sound of crystal ringing out was the final note in a long, painful symphony. The past was locked away in a cell in Spain. But here, under the warm lights, the future was just beginning. The air in the Federal District Court of Northern Georgia was cold, sterile, and smelled of polished wood and ruined lives. Marcus sat at the defense table, but the man who had strutted through Barcelona in linen suits was gone. In his place sat a husk of a man wearing a bright orange federal jumpsuit, his wrists chained to his waist. He looked thin, his skin sallow from months in a Spanish jail before his extradition. He kept glancing back at the gallery, looking for a friendly face. He found none. Brittany was working a shift at Walmart. Louise was at home terrified of missing a rent payment. There was only me sitting in the front row wearing a structured navy dress, watching the proceedings with the detachment of a surgeon observing an autopsy. "Mr. Brooks," Judge Harrington said, his voice booming from the bench, "you preyed on your own mother. You defrauded your wife. You used the international banking system to launder stolen funds. This court finds no mitigating factors." Marcus trembled. "Your Honor, please. I was influenced by others. I made a mistake." "You made a career of deceit," the judge interrupted, "for the charges of wire fraud, aggravated identity, theft, and money laundering. I sentence you to 120 months in a federal penitentiary. That is 10 years, Mr. Brooks, with no possibility of parole for the first 85% of your sentence." The gavel came down. Bang! It sounded like a gunshot. Marcus slumped forward, putting his head on the table, sobbing. The marshals moved in to take him away. "Wait," I said, standing up. My voice was clear in the sudden silence. "I have one final piece of business with the defendant." The judge nodded, allowing me to approach the bar. I walked through the swinging gate. I didn't look at Marcus. I didn't look at his court-appointed lawyer. I walked straight to the table where a stack of documents lay waiting. Marcus looked up, his eyes red and swollen. Hope flickered in his gaze, a pathetic, delusional flame. "Nia, you came. Did you bring a lawyer? Can we appeal?" I didn't answer him. I reached into my purse and pulled out my pen. I looked at his defense attorney. "Is this the final decree?" "Yes, Ms. Brooks," the attorney whispered, looking uncomfortable. "He has already been served. We just need your signature to finalize the dissolution." I uncapped the pen. It was the same gold pen Marcus had given me for our first anniversary, the one he bought with my money. "Nia, what are you doing?" Marcus stammered, rattling his chains. "Don't do this. We are a team. I can change. 10 years isn't that long. Wait for me." I pressed the nib to the paper. I signed my name with a flourish. Nia Brooks. Then I drew a line through Brooks and initialed the change. Nia Sterling. I capped the pen and placed it on the table. I turned around. "Nia," Marcus screamed, realizing it was over. "Look at me. I am your husband. You can't just walk away." I signaled the marshals. I walked down the center aisle of the courtroom, my heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. "Nia." His voice cracked, desperate and broken. "I love you." I pushed open the heavy oak doors. I didn't pause. I didn't flinch. I didn't look back. The man behind me was dead to me. The woman walking out the door was just beginning to live. The tarmac at the private airfield was bathed in the golden glow of the late afternoon sun. It was a different kind of heat than the oppressive humidity of the Atlanta suburbs or the scorching glare of the Spanish coast. This warmth felt clean. It felt like freedom. Standing on the pavement, the Gulfstream G650 gleamed in the light, its engines humming a low, powerful lullaby of unlimited possibility. I adjusted my sunglasses and tightened my grip on Leo's hand. He was 4 years old now, dressed in a miniature linen suit that matched mine, looking up at the massive plane with wide, wondering eyes. He didn't remember the screaming matches. He didn't remember the eviction notices or the nights I cried in the bathroom. He only knew peace. "Mommy," Leo chirped, tugging at my arm. "Is that our plane? Are we going to the island now?" I crouched down to his eye level, smoothing his hair. "Yes, baby, we are going to the island. Just us, the ocean, and no phone reception for 2 whole weeks." "Yay." Leo cheered, breaking free to run toward the stairs, where the flight attendant waited with a warm smile. I stood up to follow him, but a vibration in my clutch stopped me. It wasn't my work phone that was turned off and stowed away in my luggage. It was the old burner phone. The specific number I had kept active for only one reason. The number linked to the federal inmate notification system. I pulled the device out. The screen was cracked slightly at the corner. A notification flashed across the display. Incoming message from Federal Correctional Institution Jessup. Inmate Brooks Marcus. I swiped the screen open. The message was short, desperate, and riddled with typos likely typed on a contraband device with trembling fingers. Nia, please. It's me. The food here is rot. I'm starving. I lost 10 pounds. None of the guys will share. I know you hate me, but please, just send $50 to my commissary account. I need ramen. Please. I'm hungry. I'm sorry. I stared at the words. The man who had once thrown a tantrum because his steak was medium well instead of medium rare. The man who had stolen my mother-in-law's home to buy champagne. The man who had demanded the world on a silver platter was now begging for $50 to buy instant noodles. The wind blew across the tarmac, catching the loose strands of my hair. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the satisfaction or the urge to reply with a biting insult. But nothing came. There was no anger left. There was no hate. There was only a profound, quiet indifference. He was a stranger. A ghost story I used to tell myself. A smile touched my lips. It wasn't cruel. It was the smile of someone who had finally put down a heavy load after walking miles uphill. "Ms. Brooks," the pilot called out from the top of the stairs, "we are ready for departure." "Coming," I called back. I walked over to a metal trash bin bolted to the side of the hangar. I didn't delete the message. I didn't block the number. I simply held the phone over the opening. "Goodbye, Marcus," I whispered. I opened my hand. The phone tumbled through the air, hitting the bottom of the empty metal bin with a hollow final clang. I turned around and walked toward the jet. I climbed the stairs, taking the glass of champagne the attendant offered. I sat down next to Leo, who was already buckled in and looking out the window. "Ready for takeoff?" I asked, clinking my glass against his juice box. "Ready," Leo shouted. The engines roared to life, a deafening sound that drowned out the rest of the world. The plane surged forward faster and faster until the ground fell away beneath us. We rose above the city, above the prison, above the past. I closed my eyes as we broke through the clouds into the brilliant, blinding sun. The most profound lesson from Nia's journey is that financial literacy is the ultimate form of self-defense. While Marcus and his family operated on entitlement and appearances, believing their arrogance made them untouchable, Nia demonstrated that true power lies in competence and strategic silence. The story warns us never to mistake patience for weakness. Often the person holding the checkbook holds the real control. Ultimately, it teaches us that you cannot build a life on the backs of those you mistreat, because when the boring foundation finally decides to walk away, the entire house of cards inevitably collapses. Tap that follow button if you're ready to level up your mindset like Nia, because the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving.